November 26, 2018. First item of business is roll call. Ms. Iker.
Mayor Christy Melendez.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Ken Bennett.
Here.
Miles Baker.
Here.
Barry Wilson.
Here.
Paul Rennemeyer.
Here.
Tom Jones.
Here.
David Sislowski.
Here.
Mr. Baker, will you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Next item of business is review of agenda by the board and addition of items of new business to the agenda for consideration by the board. Are there any additional items any board member would like to bring up, or if not, I would seek a motion.
Madam Mayor, I move that we approve the agenda as presented this evening.
Second.
A motion on the floor from Mr. Rennemeyer with a second from Mr. Wilson approving the agenda as presented. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. And the motion passes unanimously. The agenda has been accepted as presented. Item number 4, this evening we have a special guest. Larimer County Commissioner Tom Donnelly is going to present to us this evening the Larimer County Community Report. So welcome, Commissioner Donnelly.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. It's good to be here with you tonight. I'd be remiss if I didn't introduce my special guest. My daughter, Kate, is with me. She's handing out the community reports here in a few moments. But mostly she needed some shoes for her Christmas program tomorrow, and so I got charged with taking her shopping right after we leave here. So that's the reality of the situation. Members of the town board, it's my pleasure to be here before you again this year to present to you our Larimer County Community Report. I believe this is the 4th iteration of the report, and really it was conceived for 2 purposes. Number 1, really to educate folks in the county, particularly in incorporated areas, what the county does, because that is probably one of the most frequently asked questions I receive is what actually does the county do? And so we tried to put that into an easily digestible document that you could use to find out some of the things the county does do. The second purpose for the report is really, I think, informative in a way that a regular budgeting document cannot be. We all kind of, if you had a budget meeting, for instance, this evening, this room would not be very full, I guarantee it. As an old pro, I've done a number of those. It's the kind of thing that makes people's eyes glaze over most of the time. And I think that does a real disservice to the work that we all do in local government. So I think the second purpose of this is really to show people what kind of results they are actually getting for the tax dollars that they are investing in local government, county government in this instance. Anyone could say, well, we gave 2% more money this year to this department or 2% less money to that department. I don't know for most of us, that doesn't mean anything. Did my service level degrade? Were they able to maintain that service level? What types of efficiencies were really possible to help us to run your operations? And so I really think that that's really the 2 purposes of this document. Number 1 is educational about the role of county government and the important things that county government does. And then second is to serve, hopefully, as a bit of a barometer in how we're investing people's tax dollars and the good results that we're getting for those dollars. So it's a nice document. It's some things it's tough to explain in enough detail, but still make it small enough and to be digestible in fairly small doses. We try to use a lot of imagery to communicate with folks. Sadly, if you look inside the front cover, there's a picture of the Board of County Commissioners, and you see Commissioner Gator there. We just lost Lou a couple months ago. He lost a long battle with cancer, and we sure do miss him. But this was something that was near and dear to his heart: performance-based budgeting and the work of local government. The work of local government were 2 things he was very passionate about. And so we're glad to have a picture of our board. Boy, we look real young there. My hair was even black, and so I like the picture too for other reasons. But Mayor, it's good to be with you tonight. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have about anything with regard to the community report or things going on in Larimer County.
Okay.
Question.
I should have known. The heckler.
What's the next step of the mental health facility? I know it passed the last election. What are your next steps for that?
Thank you, Councilman Baker and Mayor. I think that what's happening now is that we are creating a working group that is going to be comprised of representatives from the cities and the county to really be a kind of a policy group to be advisory towards staff to move this programming forward. We know there's a tremendous need for mental health services in the community. There are some plans. We had initially done some planning efforts to see if there were any existing facilities that could accommodate the services that we hope to be able to provide with the tax dollars. There really no such facility actually exists at this time, so county government will likely have to build that facility. We don't plan to staff it ourselves. We don't plan to hire county employees to run that facility. Rather, we plan to contract with the private sector provider to provide the services in that facility. I think Mayor Melendez is probably going to be the representative of the town of Windsor, and so she will have a large role in really deciding how those services will roll out. It would be my wish and my desire to see some of those services immediately provided to our schools. As you know, we have a tremendous problem in Colorado and in Larimer and Weld counties, I'm sure as well, with teen suicide, and we really would like to see services in place to help do anything we can to help to curb that trend and turn that the other way. And so those are the ongoing discussions that will occur, and we're glad to have Windsor in a seat at the table. Let me just say this too: Windsor's a unique community in many ways, but in one way that's very unique is that it really straddles the county line. And so I'm standing here in Weld County as a Larimer County Commissioner to talk about what's going on just a few miles to the west. But Windsor has always been a tremendous partner to us in Larimer County, and I know that my colleagues in Weld County would feel the same. The downside, of course, is that you have to deal with twice as many commissioners, which can be a pretty big downside. But the upside is I think that we have that many more relationships that we can forge and partnerships that we can develop to move work forward. And I think increasingly the lesson that I've learned in this job is that people care less about where they live and more about the fact that we get the work done and we work together. They don't necessarily know when they're driving on a city street or a county road or even an interstate highway for that matter. And they don't care if they're in Weld County or Larimer County. They want to be able to get to work. They want to be able to live here and enjoy the quality of life that we've all expect. They want to have a vibrant economy, and I think that they see tangibly that we all work together, regardless of parochial boundaries or even partisan boundaries, to try to maximize those services that we provide to our citizens. So thanks for the question, Maz.
Thank you.
Are there any additional questions for Commissioner Conley?
That was a pretty short question, but a long answer, right?
That's why.
If not, I want to just thank you for personally coming this evening and presenting the report in person. And you are right, Windsor is very appreciative of the partnership and the working relationship that we have with Larimer County, and look forward to continuing to work with you in the future.
Very good, and it's great to see everyone tonight, and all these people must have come out to see me. I'm excited. I don't know if I have enough community reports, but we will try to distribute those on our way out, and have a good evening, everyone.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Okay, moving on to item 5, Small Business Saturday Proclamation. Whereas the government of Windsor, Colorado celebrates our local small businesses and the contributions they make to our local economy and community. According to the United States Small Business Administration, there are currently 30.2 million small businesses in the United States. They represent 99.7% of all businesses with employees in the United States, are responsible for 65.9% of new jobs created from 2000 to 2017, and whereas small businesses employ 47.5% of the employees in the private sector in the United States. And whereas 90% of consumers in the United States say Small Business Saturday has a positive impact on their community. And whereas 89% of consumers who are aware of Small Business Saturday said the day encourages them to shop small all year long. And whereas 73% of consumers who reportedly shop small at independently owned retailers and restaurants on Small Business Saturday did so with friends or family. And whereas the most reported reason for consumers aware of the day to shop and dine at small, independently owned businesses was to support their community, 64%. And whereas Windsor, Colorado supports our local businesses that create jobs, boost our local economy, and preserve our communities. And whereas advocacy groups as well as public and private organizations across the country have endorsed the Saturday after Thanksgiving as Small Business Saturday. Now therefore I, Christy Melendez, Mayor of Windsor, Colorado, do hereby proclaim November 24th, 2018 as Small Business Saturday. And I do urge the residents of our community and communities across the country to support small businesses and merchants, not only on Small Business Saturday, but throughout the year. Moving on to item 6, Board Liaison Reports. Town Board Member Baker, Tree Board and Historic Preservation.
Thank you very much. The Historic Preservation Board met on November 6th. There was discussion of a CSU professor and a few of his students doing a study of some of the downtown blocks. I think it's similar to what they did with the church study. They want to look at some blocks within downtown and some of the old historical houses. There's also discussion of some monument signs, maybe in front of historic buildings or even by the lake, emphasizing the historical significance of the lake. And they decided that they were going to meet quarterly in 2019. I have no update on the tree board. They meet tomorrow at 5:30.
Okay. Town Board Member Wilson, Parks, Recreation and Culture Advisory Board, Poudre River Trail Corridor Board.
Parks, Recreation, and Culture welcome 2 new members to the advisory board. That's Nick Mask and Sean D. Patine. And the Poudre River Trail, the big announcements today, the section referred to as the Kodak section east of Highway 257 was reopening today after being closed for some major repairs dating back to the 2013 flood.
Okay. Board Member Bennett, Water and Sewer Board.
No meetings or no updates since last meeting. The next meeting will be December 12th.
Okay. Town Board Member Rennemeyer, Chamber of Commerce.
At our regular meeting here in November, earlier this month, the big topic of conversation was the voting for next year's Board of Directors. The ballots are out. I believe that they will be back in, and so we'll be interested to see who our new board members are. Other than that, we didn't really cover any other new information.
Okay. Town Board Member Jones, Windsor Housing Authority, Great Western Trail Authority.
Yes, Madam Mayor. I'm pleased to report that the Great Western Trail Authority just received a $250,000 GOCO grant under the Colorado the Beautiful program. And we are hoping that is going to allow us to finish construction of the trail from Severance to Eaton starting this spring. Windsor is the Great Western Trail Authority sponsor in this. Basically, Windsor's a pass-through for funds from the state from the trail. And there is no match required for this particular grant. The Windsor Housing Authority, I think you're all aware that we're going to have a presentation from representatives from the Housing Authority on December 10th. They're going to be requesting some funding from the town, primarily to help fund a new executive director. That's all.
Okay. Town Board Member Sislowski, Clearview Library Board and Planning Commission.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Library Board had a special meeting on November 9th. I was not able to attend, and Board Member Wilson did attend on my behalf if he would have any comments. They have a board meeting coming up on November 29th later this month, and it's at that meeting that they will discuss open board positions for those whose terms are expiring at the end of the year. Representative Wilson, did anything on the?
Yeah, just real quick, that was the day after the election, so they're obviously disappointed with the ballot measure that didn't pass. So they were reviewing the budget, obviously without the tax increase or mill levy. And it was really looking at the number of users they have to the library, the number of services they provide with our rising population are also rising. So they're reaching out to the community to decide how to move forward, how to continue providing the good services that they do within the budget that they had. Now, the good news is they are seeing some increased budgets, and you know, right now, some people I know have asked about the property that they own on Main Street, and right now that they still hold that, obviously, and it is basically an asset or an investment that's probably doing just as well as any other investment that they have, given the rises in property values and things like that in this area. So the big thing is, like I said, that the services, the number of users they have, the number of interactions that they have are continued to going up. And right now it's going out to the community to determine what their next steps are to continue on, so.
Thank you. The Planning Commission met on November 7th. Last met on November 7th. There were no communications from the Planning Commission to the board. And several of the items that were reviewed at that meeting we find on our agenda this evening.
Okay. And I have Downtown Development Authority and North Front Range MPO. The next meeting for the North Front Range MPO is scheduled for December 6th. So we have not met since that time, since the previous meeting that I reported. Downtown Development Authority did meet on November 14th. So a couple of items from that are some demolition and minor work has begun on the mill. So the mill is back under construction. They are hoping for a opening of the mill project sometime next year, probably next summer, in June or possibly July. So that project is moving forward. We did close on the Birch property, so that is now under the ownership of the Downtown Development Authority as well. We're looking, I believe we were waiting for the property owner to complete getting rid of some of their property that they still had on there. Once that's completed, the next thing that they'll be looking at is demolition of the buildings that are there to prepare that lot to become a parking lot. So next spring, the parking lot that is currently behind the buildings on 5th and 4th Street, that parking lot will move. We hope, we have to go and apply for a CUG, but we'll convert into that space then. As part of the plan for the backlot project. The wayfinding project, the wayfinding sign project completes at Windsor Wonderland. So they will have their person there at Windsor Wonderland, which is December 1st, from noon to 5 o'clock. Santa Claus will arrive by the train, the historic railroad train from Great Western at about noon. And then we'll move into a special tent that we have on site. But we also will have Kristen Seifert on hand, who will be getting folks and getting their comments about wayfinding, and then that project will be completed in December, and all the information will come back to the board sometime in January. So we also just did the Small Business Saturday proclamation today, so I want to remind everybody that along with that, the DDA did kick off their Find the Elf on the Shelf program. If you walk into, there's 24 businesses in the downtown that are participating this year. If you walk into any of the participating stores, you can pick up a registration form, find 5 different elves in 5 of the different businesses, complete your registration on or by 4 p.m. on December 1st, turn it into toast, and you could be the winner of one of 4 different gift certificates that they are giving away to any of the participating businesses of your choice in the downtown area. So support our local business, support the downtown, and shop Windsor this holiday season. With that, we will move on to item 7. Item 7 is public invited to be heard. This is for individuals wishing to participate on and to speak to us on a non-agenda item. Did we have anybody? We didn't have anybody who signed up? Okay. So since we didn't have anybody who signed up for the public invited to be heard, we will move on to item B, the consent calendar. We have 4 items this evening under the consent calendar, and I would seek a motion.
Madam Mayor, I move that we approve the consent calendar as presented.
Second.
We have a motion on the floor for Mr. Rennemeyer with a second for Mr. Bennett approving the consent calendar as presented. All in favor, vote yes. Opposed, no. Consent calendar is approved unanimously. Moving on to board action, item C, first item, is a presentation and a request from Spiraling Up Foundation, the long-form grant request. So application presentation, are you going to kick that off, Mr. Hale?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
So Spiraling Up Foundation has submitted the Catch Long Form Grant requesting $10,000 from the 2018 budget for the Critical Needs Program. The Spiraling Up Foundation is a nonprofit agency in northern Colorado addressing social, behavioral, and academic struggles with disadvantaged youth in the community. The 2018 outside agency fund has a beginning balance of $89,656. This year, the board has awarded $18,255. So there's a current fund balance of $71,401 remaining for 2018. And I believe Mr. James Ballin or Mike Mercer is here. All right, there he is. I looked for him, but there's a lot of people.
If you'd like to come forward, yeah, I'm sure at some point he's gonna, or are you gonna
Well, no,
turn it over to
I
him
think
right now?
it's turn
Okay.
over to James right now.
Okay.
He's got it.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening. If you will just, for the record, state your name and address for the record.
Home address or business address?
You can do your business.
Oh, James Ballin, 1555 Main Street, Unit A6 in Windsor.
Okay. So if you just would like to tell us why you're coming before us this evening?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm coming before you because there's children in the community and across northern Colorado that are struggling behavioral, social, academic issues. And we have a center in Windsor, and we love Windsor, and we love our center. It's amazing because we can create positive change in children by putting them into our program that is integrated with sensory motor exercises, eye exercises, academic skill training, and a healthy nutrition. This is all monitored by our staff. We have to find ladies that have master's degree that have actually been in the education system, and they've come over to Brain Balance because they know they can get to the root cause and actually make a change in children's life to where they can actually behave better, they can get off of medicine, they can also do better in school. And we designed this program to do a nonprofit because funding needs to be in place to help children go through this program. And that's what this grant that we've applied for with many others is, to provide help financially for these children to get the help that they need.
Are there any questions?
Yeah, could you just explain a little bit further the relationship between Spiraling Up Foundation and Brain Balance? Brain Balance is the business,
Brain Balance is the business, the Spiraling Up is the nonprofit.
and you established, is Brain Balance a nonprofit?
It is not, it is
It's a
for-profit,
for-profit, so
yes.
you established a foundation
Correct.
as a nonprofit
Yes,
to raise funds
yes,
for Brain Balance?
for Brain Balance,
Gotcha.
yes, for the children. And there isn't a combination like that that does this type of work for children.
Yeah,
It's here
that's
in
fairly
Windsor.
unique, yeah.
It's very unique.
Yeah.
I would encourage you guys to come pay us a visit.
In your written work, you talked about a plan for sustainability. I think you said you have staff who are working on finding grants.
Yes,
That's a question.
yes, yes, we are applying for grants. We have grant writers that are donating half of their time, and we're paying for half of their time to write grants.
I guess I would like, if I may, follow up on that question, just because I have the same question, the connection between Spiral Up and Brain Balance. Does Spiral Up actually provide good services then?
Spiraling Up doesn't provide the service, Brain Balance provides the service.
Okay.
So Spiraling Up is, and I've done some, as well as fundraising on my own to put in funds for Spiraling Up.
So it's really the nonprofit fundraising
Yeah.
arm of Brain Balance,
Yes.
if you will.
Yes,
There's a comment in the application that says that the people who work, donate half their time. And I think grant writers, event planners, et cetera, are those employees of Brain Balance? Or
Yes.
They are?
They're coaches, yeah.
Okay, so,
Mhm.
Yeah, having spent just a little bit of time talking with Mr. Ballin, what the foundation, what they hope to accomplish with the foundation. So the program, while it's very successful, it is expensive to have your child run through this program. I mean, there's a cost to that.
Yes.
And they have identified a large amount of children who have been identified that they could utilize the program, but they cannot complete the program because the parents don't have the funding. Hence why they created the foundation.
Correct.
Tell me, you can stop me if I get this
No,
wrong,
you're-
James,
yeah.
but hence the foundation was set up so that when they identify kids, and they hope to take 4 kids through the program,
Yes,
I
correct.
believe,
Mhm.
with these dollars, should we commit them. It would take about 4 kids through the program. It would take some of these children that they have seen come through who don't have the financial means to go through the program themselves. But they would use this money to enable these kids to go through the program.
Correct. And we have children ready.
I visited your program, and with a background in public education, I'm very familiar with brain growth and development, so the things that you're doing, I think it's excellent.
Thank you.
I just want to make certain that you're working on a plan for sustainability. And I saw-
Yes,
Yeah.
because we do progress reports. We also work with the family a year after they're completed with the program. There's also access to Brain Balance online on the nutrition side.
And I'm saying about financial
Oh,
sustainability. Yeah, so that you're successful in the long term.
I'm sorry, I don't understand your question.
I was glad to see that you have a plan to sustain your funding long term.
Okay, right,
Yeah.
okay.
Okay.
Did I answer your question?
Yes,
I'm
you
sorry.
did.
Okay,
Yes.
okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
sorry, Dr. Jones.
So Dr. Jones, and then
Oh,
Mr.
okay.
Soslowski.
Are you eligible for any kind of, sustained government assistance? Is your program, are
You know, we'd like to spiral up to that,
Yeah,
but presently, no. It is classified a non-medical program. So we've even tried to apply for Medicaid to help, to get assistance there. But, it's work in progress. It's taken a long time to even get spiraling up going and getting funding in there to begin with. It's been a process. It's been about a year and a half.
now do the parents contribute anything, or is it strictly
Oh.
outside funding?
Oh, it would, outside funding, correct, yeah.
For these 4 children.
Yeah.
They've had other kids who go through the program that their parents totally support.
Supported,
Their
yes.
kids,
Mhm.
they have several children, I
Yeah.
believe. I don't know how
Yeah.
many who've
We-
gone through the program
Yeah.
that their parents or somebody else has
Yeah.
supported them going through.
Yeah,
the
correct. I
program.
mean, we've had over 110 kids go through the program since we've been open in less than 2 years with amazing results. There's nothing like this program.
Yeah, I
Does it-
believe in reading that this is to provide scholarships for 3 or 4
Yeah,
Yeah.
correct.
that may not have the resources to otherwise go.
Especially when you're on the lines of foster, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Of the 100, what did you say that have gone through the program? To date, you have
110,
not had
there's
any.
over 110.
To date, you
children.
haven't had any scholarships?
The scholarships we've provided personally, my wife and I.
Yeah.
Yes, we've run children through the program on our own because
I guess I'd
they need the help.
I'd like to echo again Mr. Bennett's comments, because I do think asking for essentially taxpayers' dollars to support, and one of the questions on the application was, how does this help the community? And the answer focused on the 4 children that it would help. And you have to sort of infer that helping these 4 children, or 4 children a year, is going to help the community as a whole. I'm always a little reluctant to spend taxpayer dollars on something that isn't fairly core infrastructure. This is a small amount of money, I think, to help you, but I would echo Mr. Bennett's comments to say that hopefully you'll move to a self-sustainable fundraising campaign.
That's where we're going.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So I saw you have 45,000 in individual donations, is that correct?
That's correct.
But that's not something you can count on every year?
You know, it's like a guarantee, I don't, you know, as far as a guarantee, no, but the families that have contributed that believe in what we're doing, and I believe there's more to come from those resources,
Mhm.
because they know what we're doing, and they know the results that we've been attaining.
Mr. Baker, did you have a question? Oh. Are there any additional questions from the board? Okay. Is there a motion or consensus?
I guess I move that we approve a $10,000 grant out of the designated fund. Though Mayor, I would love to have a work session perhaps on that fund and how it works at some point. But to approve this $10,000 grant as requested.
As
Second.
presented?
I'll
Okay.
second.
I have a motion on the floor from Mr. Kozlowski with a second from Dr. Jones, approving the long form grant request as presented. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. And it is approved unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, I believe as part of the long form process, we do require them to come back and do isn't there some kind of a report or something at the end? So, yeah, so we'll see something at the end, so.
Okay.
Thank you
Okay,
very much.
we will take care of it. Thank you
Okay.
so much.
Okay. Moving on to item 2, a public hearing. A resolution approving a final major subdivision, Windsor Villages at Ptarmigan, Tom Muth, Windsor Investments LTD, the applicant, John Sweet, TST Consulting Engineers, the applicant's representative. I would seek a motion to open the public hearing.
Madam Mayor, I move that we open the public hearing.
Second.
Motion on the floor from Mr. Bennett with a second from Mr. Baker to open public hearing. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. And public hearing is now opened. Mr. Hornbeck.
Thank you, Mayor, Town Board. As you are aware, this item was before Town Board on October 22nd of this year to consider the request to approve the major subdivision known as Windsor Villages at Ptarmigan. At the conclusion of the public hearing, the board decided to postpone the item for further research regarding the possibility of shifting the roundabout at County Road 5 and Oakmont Drive further west. As a reminder, the property is located generally to the north and west of State Highway 392 and County Road 5. The staff has prepared, for the record, additional analysis that follows on the subject roundabout. The limited right-of-way east of County Road 5, constrained by existing development, and the lack of required spacing between Oakmont Drive and the state highway limit the design options for that intersection. A variety of alternatives have been considered and evaluated as outlined as follows. A four-way stop was considered by Delich Associates, the traffic engineering firm working on the project for the applicant. The four-way stop would result in a level of service F, which is below the minimum standard of D required by the town in the municipal code. The traffic signal option was also considered. That option does not comply with the spacing requirement of 900 feet. I'm sorry, it does not comply with the spacing requirement of 2,640 feet, and it would be 900 feet between the two intersections. The analysis by Delich and Associates indicated a traffic signal would provide level of service D and E for the majority of turning movements. Therefore, the roundabout was recommended by Delich Associates. Restricted access was also considered, where a center median would limit turning movements, therefore only allowing right in, right out, or left in turn movements. Such a layout would function at an acceptable level of service A, B, and C. However, this configuration would result in longer travel times for those restricted movements, such as straight or left out. Traffic from the existing Ptarmigan wishing to head south onto County Road 5 or to continue straight into the proposed development would be forced to take a longer route through the neighborhood and would be routed onto 392 or County Road 3. Likewise, traffic from the proposed development would be routed north to County Road 5 and Westgate, or south to 392 and Westgate. This lack of full connection with the configuration would include a lack of pedestrian crossing and would increase the amount of traffic traveling on neighborhood streets, would increase traffic at other intersections, and also conflicts with the comprehensive plan, particularly objective number 1 of the Transportation and Mobility chapter, which states, extend roadways as development occurs to enhance the connectivity for all users and increase the capacity and mobility of the transportation network. The final alternative considered was having no connection at all there, where Oakmont would not continue west. This would have similar problems with the restricted access configuration just mentioned. It would also fail to comply with the design criteria and specifications of the town of Windsor regarding minimum connectivity. That states, quote, to ensure connectivity, enhance general circulation, and to provide secondary points for emergency access. The street layout for all subdivisions should be designed so that there is, on average, at least one connecting street to neighboring land for every 1,320 feet of development perimeter. The roundabout as proposed complies with the town standards, while none of the alternatives properly serve the traffic demands of County Road 5 and comply with town plans, policies, and standards. As you're aware, a number of residents of the Ptarmigan neighborhood voiced concerns over the proximity of the roundabout to existing homes. The applicant did analyze moving the roundabout 30 feet west, which would entirely remove the improvements from the HOA property. The roundabout, as previously proposed, would be approximately 68 feet from the house located on the northeast corner of the roundabout. The roundabout improvements closest to the house on the southeast corner would be approximately 34 feet. The 30-foot shift that the applicant analyzed would move the roundabout an additional 12 feet from the southeast house and an additional 13 feet from the northeast house. However, shifting the roundabout 30 feet west creates problems for the alignment of County Road 5 and State Highway 392. In order to tie back in with the proper alignment of County Road 5 at the 392 intersection, County Road 5 would have to taper or shift laterally at a ratio which exceeds the maximum allowed by the town's engineering standards. Additionally, that 30-foot shift of the roundabout would eliminate approximately 1,100 square feet of right-of-way dedication required from the Ptarmigan HOA, which is indicated by the green and purple colors on the drawing before you. Under the proposed shift, that would obviously go away outside the HOA property. However, that would shift to what's known as the Jaeger property, to the further to the south, so this darkened portion here. And that would increase the amount of right-of-way required from the Jaeger property, an additional approximately 6,300 square feet. The shifted alignment while outside the HOA property would also still require temporary construction easements from the HOA and would likely require perpetual easements to allow for permanent maintenance. The Jaeger property under the proposed shift would be approximately 14 feet from the roadway improvements rather than the 27 feet under the original proposal. And as a point of reference, the municipal code requires 20 feet from a house to right-of-way line if it were being a new construction. Given the information I've outlined, staff believes the roundabout in the location as presented by the applicant at the October 22nd, 2018 meeting is the best alternative for traffic flow, safety, and connectivity, and meets the town standards for intersection improvements. There were also questions about the referral comments from Larimer County. The comments are included in the packet materials. Staff has worked with the applicant and county staff to attempt to address the comments, and it's expected all those comments can be addressed except for a couple I do want to point out. They are still requesting the roundabout be shifted entirely outside the HOA property, and they are also have requested a sidewalk on the east side of County Road 5. Due to the limited right-of-way and need for drainage and street trees, staff does not recommend a sidewalk be installed on that side of County Road 5, and pedestrian access will be provided by a 10-foot regional trail on the west side of County Road 5. The proposal is in conformance with the comprehensive plan. The new notifications were sent for this public hearing in addition to the previous public hearing. At their October 17th meeting, the Planning Commission forwarded to Town Board a recommendation of approval of the final major subdivision, subject to the conditions below. Note that the applicant has requested condition number 2 be eliminated. Staff agrees with the applicant that this condition can be removed and dealt with in the development agreement negotiated between staff and the development team. Condition number 6 has been satisfied, and therefore staff recommends removing that condition as well. The conditions are, number 1, to the extent the approved plans for Larimer County Road 5 require construction of improvements within right-of-way not yet owned by the developer or otherwise acquired by the town, all such right-of-way shall be acquired and dedicated by the developer to the town prior to commencement of any such improvements within said right-of-way. Number 2 is suggested to be eliminated. Condition 3, street trees shall be incorporated into the landscape plan on both east and west sides of County Road 5 in order to mitigate the loss of any existing trees. Number 4, all remaining Planning Commission and staff comments shall be addressed prior to recording the subdivision plat. Number 5, the subdivision development agreement shall be executed prior to recording the subdivision plat. And number 6 is also recommended to be removed, as the applicants have explored that 10-foot shift. Staff requests the following be entered into the record: application, supplemental materials, staff memo, supporting documents, all testimony received, and the recommendation. Does the applicant wish to present? So unless there's any questions for me, I'd like to turn it over for the applicant at this point.
Okay, are there any questions for
I have a
Mr.
question.
Hornbeck?
Regarding condition number 2 that you removed, why would you do that, and what would prohibit them from just, would they not have a certificate of occupancy if those improvements are not done?
We removed it because we agree with them that it can be negotiated through the development agreement. And we believe there can be a phasing plan worked out where different improvements are completed in a different order. And this is something that's routinely done in a development agreement that's really not brought to your attention. In this case, it was brought to your attention due to the concerns with the roundabout, but we believe it can be adequately addressed. And one method would be through a certificate of occupancy or through a phasing plan.
Thank you.
Any, Dr. Jones?
So Paul, it's a feeling of the staff that even though they have a south access and they have a north access into the subdivision, that's not enough.
Correct. We believe the Oakmont access is also needed.
Did the applicant originally just want to put turn lanes on Road 5? Was that their preference, but the town felt a roundabout was more desirable?
No, I believe it was a joint decision that the applicant and the town both agreed that the roundabout was the best solution after looking at alternatives.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions, Mr. Hornbeck? Mr. Bennett?
I think sometimes the fire department weighs in on access points to neighborhoods. Have they reviewed this?
It was sent to them. I don't recall that we've received any specific comments on the access, but you're correct that emergency response is one of the reasons for encouraging more access points.
That's not what I was asking. I was just asking, I want to know if they had recommended the Oakmont an additional access point other than the north-south.
They did not comment
They
on it.
didn't comment one way or the other.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions?
Just one quick question. Obviously, this is being, happening because of the development, but our long-term plans were already to expand County Road 5, so is it the fact that the development's just accelerating those plans?
Correct. The long-term plan is for it to be a 4-lane arterial street, County Road 5.
Okay, Mr. Baker?
I'm sorry. If there was no roundabout and we expanded it to 4 lanes, would that, based on the center line, would that encroach further into the Ptarmigan area, that whole stretch of County Road 5?
I don't believe a 4-lane road without turn lanes or a roundabout would encroach into the HOA property.
But it would put more lanes closer to them, or is that not what we're talking about?
I believe it's correct to characterize additional lanes as being closer, yes.
Because I thought they shifted the center line to the west.
From their initial proposal, when the first submittal to the town, however many months ago, was 10 feet further east. After a neighborhood meeting with the neighborhood, they agreed to shift it. It was 10 feet. Yeah.
Okay, anything else? Okay, we'll have the applicant come up next.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, Town Board. My name is Brian Williamson. I'm with TST Consulting Engineers. We are located at 760 Whalers Way in Fort Collins. I am here to further discuss the villages at Ptarmigan. I'm not going to go through everything that we went through last time. I do have those slides available if we need to call on them for reference to the discussion. Just as a quick reminder, here's an overview of the project. It is 114 single-family lots. Average lot size at about 7,500 square feet. 3 commercial lots that are existing, and then 12 tracts with open space and 6 tracts for future development. The zoning is industrial, light industrial, and then residential mixed use. On the meeting at October 22nd, the town board directed the applicant to investigate if any accommodations could be made between the 2 parties to improve the design of the roundabout. The HOA attorney communicated with the applicant's attorney that the HOA's position was that all improvements should be located in the existing right-of-way. So then we did go through the evaluation process of the roundabout completely within the existing right-of-way. Paul has gone over most of those with you. I just want to add a little bit to what he said. I just want to note about these exhibits, the one that Paul presented and the ones I'm going to show you. These were generated as part of an alternatives analysis, and they were not based on sound engineering principles. We were really just looking to see if these things could fit. So I don't want you to look at these and make the assumption that they're going to work just because they're drawn professionally. We were really looking at, is this possible? And then I'll go through the issues that we had with them. The first alternative that we looked at was shifting the roundabout but not realigning the center line of the road between Oakmont and 392 to the west. So what that does is that creates a unsafe loading into the northbound traffic What that means is that people coming northbound into that roundabout almost have a straight shot through that roundabout. So all the curvature and geometry that's generally designed in roundabouts is not applied in that area. All of that curvature and geometry is used to control the traffic, slow them down. Even if you're not intending to slow down, you do have to slow down to really make those movements. So that creates a safe environment for other people, vehicles, and pedestrians entering into the roundabout. And it's our professional opinion and staff's opinion that that was not acceptable alternative. The second alternative is the one that was presented to you by staff, and that's included in your packet. This is the roundabout shifting out of all of the HOA right away, and then the road making that accompanying shift to have the correct geometry there. All of our concerns were listed by staff, so I'm not going to run through all of those. The taper is the main issue that I think that we have, is that it's a 30-to-1 to make that work, and 45-to-1 is the standard ratio for that taper. So we're significantly under the safe design for that area. We did meet with these alternatives for staff. It was determined, as reflected in the staff memorandum, that these alternatives had too many safety concerns to be either recommended to the board by the staff or by the professional engineers at our company. The applicant team concurs with the staff on these issues and believes that the placement as proposed on the October 22nd meeting, with the center of the roundabout located 14 feet west of the section line, as the best location for this roundabout. Paul did go through the Larimer County referral comments. We did meet with them after the 22nd meeting, prior to this meeting, and their comments are included on page 66 of your packet. We don't have any issues with their outstanding comments, except as noted by staff with the sidewalk on the east side of County Road 5. And I think we have a slightly different reading of their comments. I don't think that they actually asked the roundabout to be moved completely out of the HOA right away. They just asked to be copied on any documents dedicating right away in that area. And then there is a letter in your packet from John Truesdale, the Ptarmigan resident, and I just wanted to clear up a couple of things there. His first point was saying that the roundabout was not moved a full 10 feet out after the neighborhood meeting, where we agreed to move the roundabouts and the road the 10 feet. He said that because we eliminated the truck aprons, we were really only moving 5 feet. We did shift the center of the roundabout from 4 feet to 14 feet, a full 10 feet, and the truck aprons are included in that design that we recommended in the October 22nd meeting. And then his second point was that we agree that any language regarding the existing HOA landscape improvements or any damage to those belongs in the development agreement, and that we are happy to put that language into the development agreement, and then the securities required by the development agreement would apply to those improvements as well. All the remaining points addressing his comments are reflected in the staff memorandum. I'm not going to rehash all of those for you, but we're happy to discuss any that you would have. And then last Wednesday, a few members of the HOA came to our office and discussed this. The available members of our team, I was not actually available on Wednesday, did meet with them, and they asked for some modifications to the town standards for speed limit and the right-of-way requirements. We informed them that those were not issues that were under our purview, that they would have to come to the town to ask for those things to be changed. We really are following the town criteria for excuse me, for the speed limit, and then also for what's included in the right-of-way there. In conclusion, we agree with all the staff's recommendations as stated in the packet. We'd ask for the town board to approve the project as presented in the staff memorandum, and we are available for any questions that the board might have. Also, we would like to reserve the right to respond to any issues brought up during the public comment section of the public hearing, just so we can clear up any issues that we see there.
Are there any questions for the applicant? Okay. Mr. McCarter, did we want to, so this public hearing stems from a crossover from the October 22nd meeting, at which time we heard a large amount of testimony and we had a lot of other things pointed out to us. This particular public hearing, however, should be related to the analysis that followed from that meeting, or?
That's the way we set this up. The motion to postpone asked that the relocation of the roundabout be again explored, and also in further requests from the town board, we were asked to reach back to the county to find out what further comments they might have. So that's been done, and that really is the subject matter of tonight's public hearing, is the relocation of the roundabout, the efforts that were made to do that in the interim. And I agree that it's probably not necessary to repeat the record that was made at the last hearing, because all of that is in the record already.
It still will stand.
Yes.
Okay. Are there any further questions before we do open it, however, to public hearing? If there are any additional comments that folks wish to make, are there any additional questions from my fellow board members? Mr. Baker.
Well, my comment is, I think the public should be allowed to say what they need to say, even if it is repeating. We don't remember what they might have said, or, I mean, who's gonna officiate if they've already used that in public comment?
It's certainly, if the question is directed to me, Madam Mayor, it's certainly up to you to decide
I would
what
just
is
say that if it gets
relevant.
redundant, however, we, you don't need to keep repeating the same thing that you've heard, if you've heard it before. You just need to say that you concur with the person previous. Are there any other questions?
No, I agree with Miles that if something's repeated, it's not a big deal, that it's okay.
I will just assume, Madam Mayor, that all of the information materials that we gained at the prior public hearing are really essentially incorporated by reference into this hearing? Is that right, correct to say?
Well, it's all part of the same record. Really, what you've done is reopen the public hearing to take new evidence on the 2 points that have been addressed so far this evening.
So just for clarification, so the board had asked for, further investigation into any other possibility, and I guess it looks like applicant, both staff, town staff and applicant have concurred that the only possibility is what was originally brought to us the first time. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. We believe that's the best alternative that meets town standards.
Okay. Any other questions? If not, then we would open this up to, this is the public hearing portion. This is for the portion for anybody who wished to come to address the board. On this agenda item, you need to step forward, state your name and address for the record. I shall start the timer for your minutes.
Good evening. My name is Stuart Olive. I'm the attorney for the Master HOA. My office address is 1312 South College Avenue in Fort Collins. As you know, one of the reasons there's a concern is because the board has a provision inside its declaration whereby in order to dedicate or transfer any common area land, there must be a vote of 80% of all members. Now, it's not just 80% of people voting. 80% of everybody has to agree. I don't think we get 80% of people agree Christmas is a good idea. I mean, it just doesn't happen. So what we were asked for is the roundabout to be moved. And as indicated by the applicant, there was a meeting on Wednesday. And in that meeting, there was some proposals that were made. Because if we don't have a situation whereby it's moved off the HOA property, we're forced into a situation where you guys have to condemn it. If the town condemns it, we have to fight it. And that's also another HOA involved, the Woods at Ptarmigan. So there'd be 2 HOAs being condemned as well as the Yeager property. So there'd be 3 fights going on. What we'd like to do is limit that. If you move the roundabout off of the HOA property, there's no need for any condemnation action. And the proposal was this. If you recall, I'm not going to do the PowerPoint. I'll screw it up and probably blow it up. So, but if you recall the picture there was green areas and pink areas that were on the map. The green areas are the truck apron. Those areas have to be dedicated. If you move that area off the HOA property, then that area is not dedicated. The pink area, however, can be an easement area that the board can do. In order to dedicate the property, again, we need 80% of the vote, which we can't get. So What we had proposed was this, is that you reduce the speed limit. If you reduce the speed limit to 35 miles per hour, from 392, at least through the Oakmont intersection, or preferably down to 32E, that changes the design standards and the criteria. Everything you've seen so far is based on design standards for 45 miles an hour. That requires a longer taper and changes everything. However, if you change it down to 35, that shortens the tapers and brings everything back within standards. So if you change that, then you can change the design. The design can then be accommodated within these standards, and you don't need to take HOA property, and we don't need to fight. The perpetual easement would be given regarding that pink area so that the sidewalk could be entered into. That's a pedestrian area that the members of the community can use. It would access then the walkway across the 392, or across County Road to the walkway. And so that's what we would propose. And the other thing we would propose is a change in condition 2. And the change in condition 2 would be, rather than eliminating it, change it to where the right-of-ways have to be acquired prior to the issuance of any building permits. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, members of the Windsor City Council, thank you for allowing me to speak this evening. I'm Tom Yeager. I live at 5210 Barden Way in Ptarmigan. I'd like to cover 3 subjects this evening: the reduced proposed speed limits on County Road 5, compliance with the Windsor design standard, and the noise and light abatement for Ptarmigan residents. As a result of the new 4-lane highway on CR5, there's going to be more truck and auto traffic and pedestrians. There'll be more road noise and trucks. Faster speeds will result in higher road noise. Trucks going downhill on the Oakmont roundabout to County Road 32 are going to do engine braking. And I experience that in where I live right now on 392. Reducing the speed to 35 will decrease that engine braking and thus the noise for the residents along that track. We would like the speed limit between 392 and County Road 32 to be reduced to 35 miles per hour. We looked at the TST engineering drawings. I did my own calculations using both the state standard and the Windsor County standard. The alternative 30 feet to the west drawing resulted in 640-foot left turn lane length. My calculations using both was half of that. If you reduce it to 35 miles per hour, it reduces it even more down to 364 feet rather than the 640. That has relevance because that drawing that you saw as an alternative was not a valid drawing because I don't believe it followed the correct standard. Last point, the current TST plans for County Road 5 trees is your bullet said trees on both sides. That's not what the plan says. The plan says all the trees are going to be on the left side and they are going to all be deciduous trees. Put yourself on the east side of the road with no trees between the road and Ptarmigan community. Nothing to abate the noise, nothing to abate the light. We would like the committee, the town council to consider that we have a vested interest in where the vegetation goes along that road, and we have a right to a noise and light abatement along that road. Thank you very much.
Madam Mayor, Town Council, thank you for letting me make this short summary of what's been presented tonight. At the last meeting, we were tasked.
Can you state your name?
Oh,
and
I'm sorry.
the records?
Yes, Gordon Hadlow, 5320 Augusta Trail. And I have provided a copy of this to the council as well. What we were tasked was to look for some kind of compromise, which I think Stuart Olive, the attorney, has presented, especially in terms of, number one, moving the truck apron that would move the roundabout slightly, and instead of taking the land, providing an easement. Those two conditions, I think, would be very helpful in coming to a compromise on this. To reiterate what was said about the trees, I have put in there a recommendation that we be involved along with the applicant in talking about the trees. At the meeting we had on Wednesday, we did find that some of the statistics for the trees were in error, and they agreed with that. And so we would like to work with them on that. And so we would like to expand that to include us being involved in that. Thirdly, in conjunction with the roundabout, if we looked at lowering the speed to 35 along there, I think it would be much easier to reach a compromise on that. And then lastly, as was alluded to earlier, we would like to amend condition number 2, rather than just eliminate condition number 2, is to combine it with condition number 1, where it requires that the right-of-way be established before any work can be done. Are there any questions at all on what I just presented?
If you're finished.
I'm finished with my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My name is Stephen Wallace. I'm a resident of Ptarmigan at 5308 Taylor Lane. And I came here tonight with one concern, and I don't know if I really got my question answered or not. The traffic going south on County Road 5, when it gets to Highway 392, is extremely heavy, especially after 3 o'clock, 3:30 in the afternoon. And I see an absolute need to have a dedicated right-hand turn lane going on to 392 so the traffic can move west towards the interstate. If the only solution is going to be at a long-term point where there's a 4-lane road there, that is going to be unbearable at this point. Now, I do not know if any of these solutions are going to answer that question. We have traffic that backs up to Oakmont, heading south on County Road 5. Now, if you're going north on County Road 5, there's a right-hand turn lane onto 392, but going south, there is not. Consequently, a lot of that traffic coming out of the new development is going to be wanting to get to the closest entrance to the interstate, and they're going to want to get out onto County Road 5 and head south. And they won't be able to do that a lot of times because of the traffic going south already. The fact that there's no right-hand dedicated turn lane there means that sometimes only 1 or 2 cars will get through because the cars are waiting to go straight ahead, and the cars behind them cannot turn right. And that happens to block that. I would envision that that traffic in the afternoon will back up through that roundabout all the way down the hill to County Road 32 if there is no dedicated right-hand turn at the time that we build this establishment. That's my main concern. You want to know my background? I'm a retired Air Force major. I also worked for Mountain Crest Psychiatric Hospital for 10 years, retired 11 years ago. Mr. Baker, you brought up the question earlier. I am in favor of expanding the
Sir, we need to hold your comments and testimony to the questions at hand.
Just want to know if you want to let me know. Talk later about it. Anything you want to know about the traffic there that head south on County Road 5.
Thank you.
Good evening, members of the Windsor Town Council, Madam Mayor. My name is John Truesdale. I live at 7426 Tamarisk Drive. Tamarisk Drive is approximately 300 or 400 feet east of County Road 5 and it parallels it. I represent Ptarmigan Villas, which has 40 single-family units along Tamarisk Drive. A couple of points that I'd like to make. And first, the general comment would be this plat approval ought to be delayed until the road configuration is resolved, or at the very least, until there is a restoration plan publicly available for the changes to Oakmont's entry. As we know, approximately a third of the Ptarmigan Oakmont entrance will become part of the County Road 5 and this intersection and will be severely damaged by the proposed plat and road design. Yet, as of today, there are no designs, no specifications, no budgets for the repair and modification of Ptarmigan's entry. Apparently, it is to be left for later negotiations in a development agreement. And I ask, how can this board have an understanding of what these repairs and costs will be tonight? What assurances are there that those modifications will be of the same quality level as now existing as promised by Mr. Moose Engineers in the last public hearing? What assurance does this board have that there will be adequate funds for the work that's going to be necessary? What about the damage to the undergrounds? None of these subjects are in the packet or have been discussed with any specificity. And I would ask, isn't the basic question here is why should Ptarmigan's entry be sacrificed for Mr. Moose's real estate ambitions? Nobody can blame him for wanting to increase his dollars, his economics. But this whole problem that we're discussing tonight was initiated by this proposal of Mr. Moose.
Please speak into the microphone, otherwise the folks at home can't hear.
Just wanted to be sure I was looking at Mr. Muth. But the issue here really is, it is his voluntary action in a land use change from a previously okay land use to residential that's created this problem. Why should Ptarmigan suffer and sustain damage? Thank you.
Is there anybody else who wishes to come forward on this particular subject?
Madam Mayor, Town Council, my name is Jay Gould. I live at 5110 Hogan Court in the Ptarmigan subdivision. My property now backs up to County Road 5. As construction in the area has increased, the volume of traffic has increased. We have put in place, or the town has put in place, some signs requiring enforcement of engine brakes or not using engine brakes. I tell you that we hear at least 100 to 150 engine brakes going off starting at 7 o'clock in the morning. Have never seen any enforcement through that area. So whatever we can do, has been stated before, to cut down some of the noise would be greatly appreciated. My other concern would be when you look at the intersection of County Road 5 with 392, I saw one plan out there that indicated 2 left turn lanes southbound, 2 straight through lanes southbound, 1 right turn lane southbound, and 2 northbound lanes. If you look at the configuration of that and expect to do it in the future, you're going to have to take some more property off of the Jaegers to be able to go ahead and do that. And I guess I would hate to see us put something in place that does not meet what the long-term goals of that intersection would be. And so once you put the roundabout in place, just 14 feet farther to the west, when it comes time to develop the Jaeger property and widen the roadway, the intersection fully out, you've also already spent a ton of money on something that would be substandard. So I think you need to take into consideration what the ultimate goal is for the roadway at the intersection with the state highway, and try to plan for that in the future. Thank you for your time.
Is there anybody else who wishes to move forward? Any additional questions from town board? Did the applicant wish to come forward again to?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a couple of quick things. With regard to the reduced speed limit, that's a direction that would need to come from the town to us to evaluate if that's a possibility. That's kind of a policy decision for the town to make, and then we can evaluate based on the town's direction on that.
Okay, while you're on that subject matter, who has jurisdiction to make that change on that roadway?
It'd be the town of Windsor could do that. So I think it would just be evaluated through engineering. I understand the preliminary meeting where the suggestion came up. It's a pretty short run. I think that staff at least conceptually likes the idea of reducing the speed limit there. So this is just happening kind of end of last week before Thanksgiving, so there hasn't, it's all been, kind of a last minute consideration, but I think it's something definitely worthy of the town strongly considering there.
So if the town were able and willing to make that change, some of the other additional improvements then, I guess, or changes, do you concur that those could happen and be made accordingly?
So we haven't had any time to really look at that design, so I would say that, it could only help the situation. I think that we would be willing to evaluate that as part of the development agreement process and ask for approval and then direction to evaluate it at that point, so we don't have to belabor this public process anymore.
So could we somehow make that Mr. McCarter or Mr. Hale part of this? If we wanted that to be looked at, but we didn't want to delay this from moving forward this evening, could we make that a stipulation somehow?
The answer is probably yes. I think probably the better way to look at it is if the record supports the approval of the subdivision, you would approve the subdivision and direct staff to explore alternatives to the location of the roundabout in the improvement plans if that can be done. But at least and the applicant knows that it has an approved subdivision that the improvement plans could be changed, but if it can't be done, then we know that there is an approved design for the roundabout. And so the answer is, I don't recommend you make it a condition of subdivision approval, but I do recommend that we be urged to explore that in developing the improvement plans in light of a change to the speed limit or any other ideas that meet engineering standards. I hope I've answered the question.
Yes. Additional
I'll
questions,
get
Dr. Jones?
clarification. And what is your stipulation exactly? What are you suggesting as far as,
Well, just what Mr. McCarter recommended, that
I mean, as far as the
after
roundabout?
approval, then the staff and I guess the applicant would come together and look at if, what, changing the speed limit would do to be able to change either the, I don't know, moving or having something to do with the right of way, from what we've heard.
There's another topic that was brought up by the HOA, and that is not having the sidewalk in the right of way, but them granting an access easement for that in perpetuity. So that the sidewalk would remain on the HOA property, but in a public access easement. So I think we could, with those two things combined, I think there's some ability to evaluate that. I think it's fair to point out that this was only really brought to our attention at noon on Wednesday before Thanksgiving, and we really haven't had much chance to evaluate any of these design changes at this point.
But there is a chance that it may not change anything, correct? By lowering the speed limit, it may not change any land requirements or?
It's hard for me to say without us looking into it. I mean, I don't think it's going to have a negative effect on any of the layouts. I think there's a lot of potential for it to be a benefit, but I'm hesitant to say anything as we have not been able to explore it.
Mr. Baker?
Yeah. I have a question for Mr. McCarthy. Can you restate why this should not be a condition? If we approve it as a condition tonight, we don't have to come back to a public process like you mentioned.
By making it a condition of subdivision approval, you're injecting the improvement plans into the subdivision approval. The improvement plans are really an engineering-based analysis and decision that are done based on standards. And so the way that this is set up is to give the technicians, if you will, the engineers, the traffic folks, the authority under the standards you've already adopted to apply those standards to the demands of this intersection. And it should not hang up a subdivision that has otherwise got record support for subdivision approval, because a subdivision is just capturing the creation of lots within this property with street configurations, but then you fall back on the engineering standards to get you where you need to be when it comes to streets. So my recommendation is that you not condition engineering standards or departures from engineering standards because we're really not equipped to do that in this environment. The standards have been adopted. It's a question of whether the subdivision has support in the record, and you can certainly encourage the engineers and the applicant to figure out something else when it comes to the street improvements, but I don't recommend you make it a condition of subdivision approval.
Okay, so we can highly encourage.
Well, and to put it another way, Mr. Baker, I think that if a condition was direct staff to explore the option of reducing the speed limit in the area to see if that'll reduce the improvement, I think that's fine. I think what Mr. McCarter's saying is just don't say it's approved as long as you reduce it to 35 miles per hour and it reduces. So I think as far as board giving staff direction, we think this is something we ought to explore. We ought to look at seriously and see if we can reduce the encroachment on Ptarmigan. That's a perfectly valid condition.
Because my assumption is that this is not the ideal situation for the developer to have to try to get this property. And if the 35 actually works, it seems like a good option.
Our only reservation is we haven't had any time to evaluate it.
My assumption is that the traffic, it's such a short distance, I don't know, and the volume of traffic, it may just go to 35 anyway.
Right.
And
So
by
might
designing it to that
participate.
standard might be a benefit to everyone.
Yeah, I mean, you're right in between a roundabout and a stoplight, so I mean, there's, the only condition would be if you're coming up 5 and you hit that green just perfectly, which never seems to happen for me.
No.
That you would be able to really maintain that speed through that area. This is Mr. Tom Booth, I think you'd like to.
Yes, I would. Mayor Melendez and Town Board, thank you for this opportunity to speak. What the HOA board brought up recently, Wednesday, is really at the 11th hour. But anything, I developed Ptarmigan, so that there's a labor of love with that. And regardless of Mr. Truesdale and my real estate holdings and whatever that meant, this was zoned, as the town board and the town staff knows, that this was all 100 acres of commercial. And what I've tried to do was blend both properties into, County Road 5 was always in the design going to be a 4-lane road. I mean, it needs to be, and it is because it's broke now. But by having these roundabouts and the way that we designed it, it gives us a kind of an urban feel instead of a rural feel, and I think it will automatically slow the traffic down. But being the fact that it's 35 miles or 45 miles, I think that's such a short distance. That's not a decision for the developer. I'm not making up the speed limits. All I'm trying to do is to get a win-win here. And I don't want this project being held hostage because we need to move forward. There's always going to be development. It is broke now. And I would suggest that, look, however we can work it out in terms of negotiation with the HOA of Ptarmigan, and I understand the restrictions they have. I developed those CC&Rs, so I know how difficult it is to get 80% of the votes. Half that development never uses County Road 5. So if we can work something out that is engineering approved, regardless of the traffic, and we can work out something so that we don't have to condemn the HOA, to me that's a win-win. And I'm willing to work on that with the town staff in a development agreement. And there's a lot to be said to keeping both sides of the County Road 5 happy. And I leave you with that, and if anyone has any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Are there any additional questions? Okay.
I just have
Okay.
just 2 or 3 more quick points.
Yes.
On the intersection of 5 and 392, as we talked about last time, those are part of a separate plan set, but they do include a dedicated right turn lane at that both the interim and the ultimate plans include a dedicated right turn there from County Road 5 onto 392, which would be going west there towards the interstate. So Mr. Wallace's concerns there are addressed in those plans. As to Mr. Truesdale's comments, all of his concerns about underground utilities, restoration of impact for the construction, those are all dealt with in the development agreement and for every subdivision that you guys approve. This is not separate. I think they're just not, he might not be familiar with the way that the process generally runs here. And then to Mr. Gold's concern, the interim curb and gutter location is actually at the ultimate build out of that right turn lane. So we wouldn't be building something and then ripping it out at a later date. That'll all be planned for the ultimate and then striped and constructed. Happy to answer any questions you might have on
Just one more question. I apologize if you might have answered it already, but if you were to go with the, I think staff had listed as the restricted, the left turn lanes in the median as opposed to the roundabout, how does that impact the property you'd need on each side?
We haven't done a detailed analysis of that because there was a couple of concerns that really threw that out early on. That is that there's no pedestrian connectivity across County Road 5 in that configuration because the north-south traffic is always moving through. And then I believe that while it would function as the level of service A, B, and C, it did result in longer travel times for the restricted movement. So anybody trying to come across that intersection would have to basically go all the way up to the roundabout at 32E and come come back down or find another route through the subdivisions, which is going to cause more traffic on the local streets rather than the arterials, which is really where that should be.
Okay. Any additional questions from town board?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Is there any, we have everything we need now for the record to close public hearing, Mr. McCarter?
It would appear.
Okay.
Madam Mayor, one thing I would like to clarify for the record, and it's with Mr. Williamson. The slides that he displayed earlier tonight, I don't know whether a copy of that has been made available to the clerk, but if he wants that in the record, I would like that clear. I would like him to make that clear for the record so that we can supplement the record later with an actual copy of his slides.
We will happily provide those for the record.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. That's all I've got.
Okay. Okay, Mr.
Madam
Kozlowski?
Mayor, I'll move to close the public hearing.
Second.
We have a motion on the floor from Mr. Kozlowski with a second from Mr. Rennemeyer to close public hearing. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. Public hearing is now closed. Moving on to item 3, resolution number 2018-95. A resolution approving a final major subdivision, Windsor Villages at Ptarmigan, Tom Muth, Windsor Investments LTD, the applicant, John Sweet, TST, Consulting Engineers, the applicant's representative. Quasi judicial, Mr. Hornbeck, do you have anything further?
Nothing further, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Anything additional from town board? Mr. Baker.
I would like to propose a condition that we direct town staff, I don't know if it needs a condition, to look at the reduced speed rate and how that would change the configuration of the roundabout.
Okay. So,
I would agree with that.
okay.
Well, we just heard from Mr. Muth that he's getting together with the HOA and they're gonna try to resolve this. Did I hear you right, Mr. Muth?
At the town's direction.
So,
Okay, so,
And that should be a development agreement. That should be part of the development agreement.
so do we have a, are you making a motion, Mr. Baker, to change the motion on the floor, or?
If need be.
Because I read a motion, and now we're having comment, but now you would like to see that motion changed with the condition.
Well, I think the question
Or is it
more
part of the
strictly is whether you're asking that this be added as a condition for subdivision approval, or if staff is simply to be directed to explore it when evaluating the improvement plans. My firm recommendation is that you not condition subdivision approval on modifications to the improvement plans because they are legally distinct.
Understood.
So do you concur with what Mr. McCarter said? Okay. Any further discussion?
It is awkward, you know, because we've heard a lot, and yet all we're really being asked to do is approve a subdivision plan.
Right.
And let the details be worked out by, as Mr. McCarter says, the technical people who are charged with doing so. And on that basis, it feels like it's their role to just make the motion regarding subdivision approval.
I agree, but I think we can give direction to staff, as Mr. Miles suggested, to explore the possibility of reducing speed limit with the idea that that might alter the engineering design of the roundabout.
I think you're having
both
said it,
sides
just
are, both sides are willing to explore that, it sounds like, as well as the town.
That's what I heard.
Right.
But that's not a condition of approval.
So what would be condition related to
Right.
this? I think it's
Right.
I don't know,
It's understood.
a recommendation or a request
Yeah.
that this board would make as part of, upon approval of this.
Understood.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay,
So with that, Madam Mayor, I move that we approve resolution number 2018-95.
Second.
okay, we have a motion on the floor for approval of resolution 2018-95. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. And the resolution passes unanimously. Moving on to item 4, public hearing, an ordinance approving a planned unit development zoning overlay for the Brands East Planned Unit Development Overlay District. Martin Lind, manager, Eagle Crossing Windsor LLC owner, Mitch Black, Norris Design, owner's representative. Is there a motion to open the public hearing?
Madam Mayor, I move that we open public hearing.
Second.
Motion on the floor from Mr. Ennemeyer with a second from Mr. Wilson to open public hearing. All in favor, vote yes. Opposed, no. Public hearing is now open.
Mr. Kozlowski, did you have a disclaimer for the public hearing and planning commission?
Thank you.
Keeping it alive.
Well, I guess Madam Mayor, as you know, I'm the board liaison to the Planning Commission. I did attend the Planning Commission meeting where this particular topic was discussed and presented. I didn't participate in the meeting and I did not ask questions. I merely observed. Having said that, I'm here tonight and I will independently review the materials that come forward in the public hearing and base any decision I make solely on the information I gain at this public hearing today.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Horvath.
Thank you. This is a planned unit development, or PUD, overlay rezoning request on approximately 57 acres, known as Brands East. The proposal has been reviewed in accordance with Municipal Code, Chapter 16. The proposed site is located to the north of Crossroads Boulevard and east of Fairgrounds Avenue. The subject property was first annexed into the town in 2003. That annexation provided general commercial zoning along Fairgrounds Avenue and Crossroads Boulevard with limited industrial zoning on the interior of the site. In 2017, the limited industrial zoning within the PUD boundary was rezoned to general commercial in anticipation of the PUD and as a part of a rezoning of additional property outside the bounds of the PUD. Therefore, current property is general commercial for the entirety of the 57 acres. The comprehensive plan identified Fairgrounds Avenue as a corridor as an entertainment district, citing its role as a major arterial roadway, proximity to I-25, and existing development of the Ranch, Budweiser Event Center, and the Summit. The plan goes on to state that, quote, the vision for this commercial area is to develop with uses that cater to and enhance the district as a major northern Colorado entertainment, dining, and hospitality cluster, which can act as an extension of the Centerra development to the south. The town of Windsor should work with local private property owners and existing businesses, as well as the city of Loveland, to coordinate investment strategies for the area and its corridors to manage and brand the district as an identifiable destination in the region, end quote. A business assistance agreement offering certain inducements and incentives for the development of Brands East was approved by the town board in March of 2017. That agreement stated that the developer proposes to build, or caused to be built, approximately 1.2 million square feet of high-end mixed-use master plan development consisting of major and minor retail anchor stores, mixed-use retail, multifamily apartment facilities, Class A office space, a limited service hotel, full service hotel, pad sites for nationally recognized retailers and restaurants, and a light industrial space. Additionally, the town and city of Loveland have worked with the property owner and other property owners in the area in creating a intergovernmental agreement, or IGA, for the corridor, which has been adopted by the respective jurisdictions. The IGA adopts a right-of-way plan to ensure consistent branding of Fairgrounds Avenue between jurisdictions, and future development within this PUD would be subject to that IGA. The subject rezoning application will create a PUD overlay district, which constitutes an amendment to the town's official zoning district map. And the development standards approved with the PUD will be applied to future land use applications. The intent of the PUD regulations is, among other things, to provide flexibility in land planning and development, resulting in amenable relationships between buildings and ancillary uses, and permitting more intensive use of land where well-related open space and recreational facilities are integrated into the overall design. Complete copy of the PUD regulations are included in the packet materials. The PUD proposes variations from the municipal code as well as the commercial corridor plan regarding allowed uses, site architectural and landscape design standards, and the development review process. There are tables which outline the major differences in those items, which I'll run through quickly. The different uses proposed, the existing uses allowed in general commercial are on the left side, proposed uses on the right, and I do want to note the proposed uses are generally consistent with the general commercial. There are a few uses that stand out, such as artisan or craft foundry, manufacturing, warehousing, etc., art gallery, studio, workshop, live work facilities, educational facilities, manufacturing and preparation of food products, multifamily dwelling, possibly apartments and other types of multifamily. The land uses, again, are generally consistent. The residential use is one that the applicant and staff have worked together on to ensure that a minimum level of commercial development occurs in accordance to accompany that residential development. As such, the PUD has a stipulation that residential development will be limited to a maximum of 400 dwelling units until commercial development or building permit issuance equaling either a minimum of 50,000 square feet or commercial development with sales forecasted in excess of 25 million in gross annual sales are required. Additionally, there are a number of development standards which are proposed to alter existing general commercial standards. There would be setbacks allowed for pedestrian-oriented areas internal to the site of 0 feet, maximum building height of 130 feet for office, residential, and hotels, and it would be 55 for all other uses. That is in comparison to the 55 feet allowed in the general commercial zone district and 30 feet allowed in the commercial corridor plan. Just a moment, I'm sorry. There are also allowances for reductions in parking based on shared parking between uses, such as an office which has peak use during the day and an apartment or residential with higher use towards the evening and overnight hours. And reduced livable open space, such as recreation amenities or clubhouse, proposed with multifamily development. There are also a number of changes proposed to the process required for future land use submittals, such as site plans or subdivisions within the boundary of the PUD. A number of those variations include the review timeframes. One proposed standard would be to mandate review timeframes by the town of 2 weeks for site plans. The applicant has indicated this is necessary in order to achieve parity with the Loveland Brands project, and staff is committed to meeting those deadlines. There would also be administrative approval of all subdivisions rather than major subdivisions, which typically require town board approval. Finally, the master sign plan specifications. Planning Commission would be able to approve and review master sign plans, which are in excess of municipal code requirements. This would typically require a Board of Adjustment variance approval, which would require a hardship. The proposal is in conformance with the comprehensive plan, particularly the land use map, which depicts the property as neighborhood and general commercial. It's also consistent with the Fairgrounds Entertainment District previously discussed. The mixed-use development proposed with the application is also consistent with the comprehensive plan, which highlights the benefits of mixed use. It is also consistent with Chapter 5D and 5C framework plan, goal, and objectives. The notification was sent in accordance with the municipal code. At their November 7th meeting, the Planning Commission forwarded to Town Board recommendation of approval of the PUD overlay rezoning, subject to all outstanding Planning Commission and staff comments being addressed. Staff requests the following be entered into the record: application, supplemental materials, staff memo, supporting documents, all testimony received during the public hearing, and recommendation. The applicant's present. We'd like to hear from him.
Are there any questions for Mr. Hornbeck?
Yes.
Okay, Dr. Jackson.
Now, voting on this tonight, we are also voting on the standards that are proposed.
Correct, you're voting on the standards.
Okay. They're quite, just about everything in here would be a variance normally, correct, in any other development?
The height is probably the biggest one that, yes, would require a variance. There are a few other items, such as the zero setback internal to the site. In general, I think the standards proposed exceed the design standards required in terms of architectural, landscaping, things of that nature. But there are a few items, yes, that would require a variance typically.
Okay, and the 400 proposed multifamily before commercial starts, that doesn't count what's being built over there now. This would be a separate.
Correct, it's separate, yes.
Okay. And I guess I don't care for this. Administrative reviewed with no communication to the town board. Can you kind of clarify that a little bit?
Can I ask where?
That's, I'm sorry, that's qualified commercial / industrial site plan.
Right. I think we can still communicate those to town board.
Nice.
Yeah, but yeah, there would be no action or real consideration by town board.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, besides the building height, you mentioned the zero setback for pedestrians. The other thing, you know, when we look at the residential, you know, some of those numbers are from existing to proposed or being cut in half from like the lot size to and so on. I don't know if you could give me, if there's something to compare that to. I mean, what's that gonna look like? I mean, for me, I'm not a developer, I'm not a planner and engineer. I wanna get a better feel for going, if we approve that, obviously, high density, it makes sense. But, I don't know if there's something, if there's another development out there that's set up like that, maybe in a nearby community, or?
I think the developer can probably show you some examples in his presentation that might answer that.
Perfect.
Mr. Bennett, did you have
Yeah,
questions?
I've got a couple questions. Regarding process, the recommended timeline, responding within 2 weeks, how feasible is that for staff?
We're committed to making it, to achieving that. So it'll be done.
Well, and I would just add, Mr. Bennett, you know, we have, we're getting ready to get under contract. We're contracting with 2 different planning firms.
Okay.
And the board is, kind of gave me that direction when I first started, that you wanted to offer that as availability. Maybe when we have projects come through to have be able to outsource that a little bit, so. I think that's kind of how we plan on skinning that cat, as far as if you've got a firm that has that capacity and has planners, it would just be part of that contract to turn that around.
I appreciate that, because I respect the need for expediency from the developer side for a lot of reasons. Begs the question, if we can do it now, why haven't we been doing it? But I think your answer, if we look at contracting services with everything going on in our community, is a fair question for me to ask about. Do we have the resources to meet that timeline? So I was concerned about that. Following up on Dr. Jones's question about approval of subdivisions, is it typical in a PUD that all subdivisions would be administratively approved?
I would not say it's typical. I think this is an unusual request. I think this PUD is kind of the town board's chance to review how it will develop in all these standards. And so the intent would, and I think Loveland and other jurisdictions are moving in a direction towards administrative type review of major subdivisions. And given the brands being on two sides within the two jurisdictions, they were seeking parity in those review processes.
And there's two goals here. One is to expediency for the developer. The other is protecting town quality and services. Administrative review would still be based on our code, zoning, standards.
It would be based on the PUD.
All the standards that are outlined in the PUD agreement.
Correct.
Okay. One more question. I think this is my last one. Permitted uses under the, let me ask it this way. Are the proposed uses, are they in addition to the existing uses of a PUD?
The proposed uses,
or in place of?
they are in addition to what's allowed in the general commercial.
They're in addition to.
Yes.
Okay, the existing allows for automobile sales service, including used automobiles. Does the board have anything to say about that? Do we have the authority to say anything about yes or no to an auto dealership?
We actually discussed this with the applicant and
Okay.
wanting to limit that, so it was limited in size, I believe, to 5 acres.
So they could do an auto dealership, but it would be limited to 5 acres.
Yeah, I can confirm the size after the applicant's presentation, but we
That was
did,
that was the concept, that
right.
it could be, because it's included in existing uses now, so it's not being removed. It could be an auto dealership, but limited size somehow.
Correct.
Okay. That was my questions, thank you.
Okay,
It's a very
Mr.
small
Baker.
question.
Excuse me,
Oh,
Mr. Baker.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Has there been any view shed study, like what it would look like with these taller buildings?
There has not, no.
No? Okay. How would this impact our economic incentives? Are we losing a lot of commercial space? I remember when those were first proposed, it was this large shopping center, and it seemed like the incentives were based on a larger volume of sales. Would that still be generated under this concept?
Staff had similar concerns about, are we losing potential commercial ground? That is why we negotiated with the applicant the stipulation of limiting residential development to 400 units until there's that 50,000 square foot of development or the projected 25 million in sales. So I can't speak to exact projections for how that might impact those. The applicant maybe is able to speak to that. And this was shared with the Economic Development Department, and there weren't objections from them.
It would have been good to see what the impact would be. And I agree with Mr. Bennett. I feel like we're overcommitting our staff. I know there's other developments that have the same commitments. There's been other developers here tonight that might ask for those same commitments, so I don't wanna repeat what he said, but I have the same concerns.
Mr. Wilson?
That was what I was gonna bring up, was just, if we can meet the 2 weeks, great, but as long as it's not making a worse service level for other developers. That we're not giving somebody an advantage and somebody else putting them at the end of the line.
Well, and we have, as Mr. Hill pointed out, though, the board has approved 2 additional contracting service companies that we can use as alternatives to ensure that everybody can move through as they need to. Mr. Jones?
Now, we have an IGA with Loveland for that corridor, correct?
Correct, there's IGA that focuses
So
on the
I'm
design.
assuming they've adopted all these standards as well?
They did adopt mostly similar standards. There may have been some tweaks of things that they adopted that our staff wasn't comfortable with, but this is largely based off of what they adopted.
Okay. And this shared parking would be something new? That would be multifamily parking in office space at night or weekends or something of that nature?
Correct, yep. Those are examples of uses that have off-peak or differing peak times for parking. And there are ratios provided in the PUD of you can use how many percentage from one use to another that are based on national standards that have been, I think, vetted and used elsewhere to show that they do work.
Yeah, because I know when the other complex went in, we felt we came up a little short on parking spaces, so we revised the code. But now we're gonna be really short on them, it sounds like, in the residential area itself.
Well, I would say in this case, since there are those adjacent commercial uses or office uses or hotels, that there could be more opportunity for overflow and sharing versus the development further east was isolated without the other uses around it with that parking. So I'd say there is that advantage in this case.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Hornbeck before I bring up the applicant? Okay, Mr. Lynn.
Good evening, Mayor, Trustees, Mark and Lynn, 1625 Pelican Lakes Point. It's great to be here tonight. There is a pretty steep learning curve, but my staff and your staff has been at this for over a year. At the back of this packet, there is a red line comparison of the Loveland, it's called the FZOD zoning, Flexible Zoning District. And we worked for almost 2 years with Loveland to create that. And we used that as the template. And the history of this entire thing starts 5 years ago when Windsor adopted the comprehensive plan and wanted to see this area become entertainment and retail. So we took away the industrial zoning that we had. We went to commercial to set the template for this zoning tonight. What we did tonight with this PUD zoning is we've highly restricted our property to all kinds of additional restrictions, and we brought more conditions to you tonight than a normal zoning so that you can have a better vision of what's going to happen out there. In addition, Trustee Jones, there is an IGA with Loveland. We have worked with Loveland, Larimer County, and Windsor staff to adopt a corridor for County Road 5, so we don't have hopscotch development up and down that. And we have a consistency between all municipalities out there, what that will look like, sidewalk widths, park benches, treescaping, all that kind of stuff. So we really have put the project way on hold for a long time to get this all put together, and this was all predicated based on the business assistance agreement that we all worked through over a year ago to entice and let Windsor be competitive for that retail market that's out there. And so that's why we're here tonight. The area is undeniable. It's the center of the Golden Triangle. All building permits and all those blue spots that you see ahead of you are on the, what we call the Budweiser event side, or the Windsor side of those communities. And so we are in a pretty big growth spurt right now, and we're growing pretty fast. And what we're trying to do with this, with the Loveland FZOD zoning and with this PUD, is get ahead of that. And when you talk about that referral time from staff, that isn't 2 weeks to get an approval. That's 2 weeks to get a response back. So it isn't like we're going to hand something in and in 2 weeks we get a approved document back. It's just a response time, and we're very comfortable working in good faith. I mean, we have it on Water Valley, we have it on Rain Dance, and we've yet to ever have an issue with this. But what it is it's time to market. If we have a large retailer, we want to be competitive with Loveland, Fort Collins, Johnstown, Timnath. None of us are living on an island. We have to be competitive if we're going to chase that retail dollar, and that's what that whole business assistance was about. Again, we're bringing a far greater level of understanding to a zoning with a PUD than just a normal zoning. Former Mayor Jones, you talked about parking. Parking's changing dramatically in the world right now. There's a lot of people that are, if you look at the national trend in auto sales, it's going way down. People are using a lot more Uber, Lyft. This urbanization that we're going to see over at that corridor, we're going to see people living above retail. We're going to see people that are, literally living there because they work there. The ranch was approved for a tax expansion last year. I think the equivalent employees of that $250 million that they're going to spend on the ranch is about, I think, around 300 more employees. So, and right now, if you go over there, not one person has the opportunity to live next to that property. There is no opportunity to walk or bike to work right now. So it's that urbanization. Again, we use the FSOD zoning for the template, and if you have any questions about what the difference between the Loveland and the Windsor are, we've just been negotiating that around with staff, and it's all in the back of this packet. These are some examples that we've traveled to, we've studied, looked at mixed use, and they're very, very successful for the communities that they're in. These are some very successful projects that we've brought to this area already, and amazingly enough, again, when this area was conceived, this was an industrial area. We have the #1 Fuzzies in the nation. Retail sales are phenomenal. Neighborhoods love it. The church loves it. It's just an amazing asset to our community, and so we just see manifesting upon all of these successful things that are already over there. Yellow is the total acres of the properties that we call the brands. We anticipate a power center on the west side of the interstate, lifestyle center on the Loveland side by the embassy, and neighborhood lifestyle on the Windsor side. The property that we are talking about tonight is in the red. The field elevation currently out there is defined on this. The parking lot of the Embassy Suites is 5,075 feet ground level. Our Steeplechase Road there, where it's 5,000, and then the new apartments that are under construction out there are 523. So there's a lot of topography going back and forth over there. So we think that not only is being a half a mile from the closest resident on Highland Meadows Parkway, we do feel that we're complying with and becoming harmonious with what's going on at the interstate right now. Loveland side, there's been probably 50 different plans, but it's starting to incubate. You're starting to see more and more concrete and foundations poured over there. The Brands West, still again, we're looking for power center. That's a concept visual of what it would look like from the intersection of Crossroads and 925 looking back towards Windsor. Plaza areas, looking back to the west, retail, below office and residential. We do feel that, and we've been over this a lot in the last several years with you on the business assistance, if we're going to compete for retail, we have to be aggressive. And also the retailers want to know what it's going to look like. So they want a PUD zoning. They want to know that if they put their investment in there, that they have a lot of conditions that the next person bringing it in will have those same conditions. Here are the red line comparisons, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Are there any questions for Mr. Webb?
If I could, there were a couple questions that were asked earlier. One of them was about the auto. We had worked with staff on that. It is not our intent to do auto out here. However, if you're watching TV during NFL games, you'll see a thing called Carvana. Those things are the vertical deal. We actually are in negotiations with them on, we don't know whether we'll get them or not, but they're gonna come somewhere along the northern Front Range here. And they use 1.5 acres, and they do about 80 million in sales. So it would certainly be somebody we would love to attract and not eliminate.
Mr. Baker.
I have a question or a comment, and I think I see what you're looking at out here, and I know every project you've done in Windsor's been really nice.
Thank you.
But my concern is the height of the building, 130 feet. Why can't this be accomplished with like 3 or 4 story buildings, you know, apartments or condos above commercial? Why do we need to go 130 feet? My concern is, as you sell off these lots, you know, I know the restrictions are in place, but we don't really know how many of those buildings will be out there that size.
Well, again, we are following the spirit and the intent of the Loveland zoning. And if we're at that same height in the Loveland side, which is about the Embassy Suites, Embassy's about 120. And if you look at the AGL here, the Embassy Suites is already 75 feet above us. So if you're looking at a horizontal plane, we are just trying to be competitive with the Loveland side. That's all we're doing.
Any additional questions from Mr. Lind? Okay, this is the public hearing. So if there is anybody who wishes to speak to the board on this agenda item, this would be the time to step forward, state your name and address for the record.
My name is Pat Davey. I live at 8795 Longs Peak Circle. And I oppose this more than anything, the variance he's asking for with the PUD at the same time. I like Mr. Jones's ideas that these are variances that should have to go through their own process instead of the PUD being gifted with all these outrageous variances. And some of the ones I would like to point out again, and of course, Mr. Baker, I agree with yours 100%. 130 feet is, the standard is 55, okay? A lot of people gave comments, a lot of staff in the past years said 55 feet is damn high enough, you know? And now Mr. Lind says, no, Loveland wants to go 130. That's not right. Let Loveland go 130. They got the Embassy Suites, which, by the way, Mr. Lind, you know how high the Embassy Suites is? Not 120, it's 97, okay? He wants to go 130. That's a lot more than what his number is. You know how big those water towers are? They're a dominant scene out there, right? You see them from, as you come over the hill from Berthoud, Colorado, right? You see those water tanks. Those are 152 feet, and he wants to go 130. And he's not even saying what buildings, or how many buildings there's gonna be like that. 130 feet is outrageous. And what Paul didn't mention, the open space is going to be reduced from 20% of the standard, is the standard that somebody's in the town came up with a long time ago and thought it was a good idea. He wants to reduce it to 10%. That's cutting it in half, okay? 50% less open space. Just because we're going to create this Disneyland to the west in Loveland, the event center. Well, Mr. Lind always shows you all these nice pictures of all these 4-story buildings. Did you see any 130-foot buildings in those pictures? No, they're 4 stories. 4 stories at the most in those pictures. And he spent a lot of money for those pictures. Anyway, he talked about this overlay, and that's true. Loveland has worked with the town of Windsor, but what he didn't tell you, that there's some of those lots along Crossroads that have limitations to 100 feet. He didn't tell you that. It's always 130. He wants the most. He always wants the most. And I just really oppose the height of 130 feet. Keep it to the standard of 50 feet. That's high enough. That's 4 stories. Thank you very much.
Is there anybody else?
Excuse me. Vicki Reinke, 5203 Hialeah Drive. I will look down on all of this. I look over the park right now. At question tonight really is, what do we want Windsor's front door to look like? And do we want it to look like downtown Denver? Because as he addressed at the planning board, he couldn't tell us how many 130-foot buildings, as many as he could squeeze on legally. We're looking at another downtown Denver as we come into Windsor. Do we want to leave the decision of what our front door looks like to a developer that's lining his pockets? You know, I just think the common sense, the things that you guys have pointed out tonight, that your little red flags, listen to those, because you're giving really carte blanche to a developer that really only has his interests, and we're not seeing the whole picture. Let's make him come back. Let's deny him this request, make him come back on a case-by-case basis so that you guys can approve and see what he wants to do. This is just giving him a blank check to do whatever he wants with no consideration for anything else but himself. And I'm begging you guys to reel it back in, don't let it go forward, pull him back, and have some accountability. Thank you very much for your time.
Is there anybody else?
Hello, my name is Kim Davey. I live at 8795 Longs Peak Circle in Steeplechase. And I just ask you to stick to the standard that's in place to have that height restriction at 55 and 30, not 55 and 130. I actually spoke to the engineer at the Embassy Suites today and confirmed that it is between 96 and 97 feet, 8 stories tall. Also talked to the planning department in Loveland, and they confirmed that same thing. So I'll just go back and reiterate on the subject of one of the other agenda items today. How does going from 55 feet to 130 feet benefit Windsor? I totally understand the development. I understand what he's trying to do there. I understand that it's going to go through regardless of what we want. Please, let's just restrict that height. So when you drive into what Mr. Martin calls the gateway or the entrance to Windsor, which I like to think of downtown as Windsor, that's not the first thing you see are these ginormous buildings. Thank you for your time.
Is there anybody else?
Kurt Reinke, 5203 Hialeah Drive. And I would pretty much reiterate what the last person just said. That height, you know, is in my view, we live east of there, and that's just a ridiculous variance from the original. I think I would really encourage you guys to consider keeping it at the 55 feet. Thank you.
Is there anybody else?
Dominic Weber, 7883 Cherry Blossom Drive. I want to reiterate what the other people have said so far. I'm a fairly new resident to Windsor. One of the main reasons I chose to live in Windsor is because of the beautiful landscape, the fact that there's not tall buildings everywhere, And I think a lot of the people, especially, you know, Highlands Meadows, Steeplechase, all the people in that area, they thought the same thing when they bought here. And if we move forward with increasing the heights of these buildings to 130 feet, you're alienating all the people that live in those developments that purchased when those were light industrial at 55 feet. And I don't know how many people are going to have mountain views that are ruined and have property values that are impacted by this decision. And I think the height is the major impact to those property values and the ambiance of Windsor changing. And I request that you deny the 130 feet height. Thank you.
Is there anybody else? Are there any further questions from the board?
Madam Mayor.
Oh, yeah, Mr. Baker?
Mr. Lind, is there any mechanism in place where we could, where you could come back to us with these height variance requests on a case-by-case basis?
Oh, can you, yeah, come.
Yeah, I jotted down some notes here, and height is a big concern. But if we go back to the site plan, you're looking at a view corridor right here. You see my mouse, there we go. We're fully developed out from this point right here all the way to Crossroads right now along this way. So the view corridor from this heavy industrial over here, the area we're talking about that would obstruct the view would be right here. But in the spirit of a couple things that were mentioned, you know, this isn't a developer bashing deal here. This is a thing about Windsor. And these residents have concerns. We took away an industrial zoning that had a 75-foot height variance. That was in industrial, that was what we were allowed, was 75 feet. The 55 feet is in commercial. So if those of you that have been here a long time know that this was all zone light industrial, except for this corridor right here. So we took that and we did reduce the 75 feet down to 35 in this area. So in a spirit of compromise, if we were allowed 75 feet, but yet we had something that would come in that would want to go over that, we'd bring it back for a variance on that. I'd be happy to do that. Because it's not really what we anticipate, but we don't know. This area is changing fast. And what we want to do is be competitive, and we don't want to lose out just for the sake of a snag or something that we didn't make Windsor competitive. And, you know, I take exception to this, show pretty pictures and then don't perform. I've stood here for 30 years. I've never shown a pretty picture that I didn't perform on. I live and breathe Windsor. I actually brought several projects to Windsor that weren't originally in Windsor. They could have easily gone to Loveland. So it's a little bit disheartening to be painted with the broad paintbrush of somebody that doesn't care, because I do care. What I want to do is I want to put Windsor at the most competitive advantage, but yet we added all of these conditions to this PUD, and we added landscaping, and yes, we cut the open space down because it is urban. The conditions that are under normal zoning don't apply to this. If this is developed right, this will be a very intense landscaping. It's not just going to be big fields of grass. It's fountains and it's intense landscaping. So with staff's assistance over the last year, we've compromised all of these things, and I think staff will concur that this is a phenomenal opportunity for Windsor. But also the business assistance that we negotiated 2 years ago is with the template for this. Because we can have that business assistance, but if we're not competitive on zoning and on land use, we're not going to get those retailers and we're not going to get that use. So I would be very comfortable staying at 75 feet, and if we had a height that was over that, we'd bring it back for a variance. I'm okay with that.
Mr. Baker?
Thank you. I think that's a good compromise, because you even said we don't know what's coming,
Mm-hmm.
and you're asking us to approve something we haven't seen like, okay, it's gonna be, the building's gonna be here, here, and here. So I think that's a better compromise. How many floors is 75 feet, just out of curiosity?
Well, hotels are different than residential. I think there's 4 feet difference. And when I was quoting the height on that, we were using the height of the airport, the upside down wedding cake, if you will. And there's some antennas and things like that. So when we look at it from an navigation easement, the embassy's taller than their actual brick and mortar. But whatever, 100 feet, 130, doesn't matter.
Any additional questions?
I guess if the applicant is requesting that the minimum standard be at 75, does that require a amendment with the motion?
Yeah, it sounds like the applicant is offering to reduce it from the 130 to 75, leaving room for future height modifications in particular cases. So we would want the motion to approve the PUD to reflect that.
And that would happen in the ordinance, when we get to the ordinance
Yeah,
piece, not in
and
the-
we
okay,
can
right.
modify the ordinance accordingly. While I have the microphone, Mr. Lind has presented a PowerPoint tonight. I don't know whether that is in your materials already or whether he brought that with him, but if he wishes to include that in the record, we should confirm that for the record and then get a copy when he's ready.
Yep, that's perfectly fine.
Okay, any additional questions?
I just have a comment. You know, I think this is good.
This is not the comment period.
Oh, sorry.
This is the
No,
public
it
hearing.
is a good question, no formal question.
Okay.
So, on here we see the, 542 over at, Highland Meadows Parkway, then it drops down to 5,000 in the area we're discussing. How high was it over by, it's kind of a dip there, isn't it, is my question?
There is.
What's the elevation at Embassy Suites?
It's down there and highlighted on the bottom. It's 5,075
Oh, sorry, I
feet.
didn't see that.
Yeah, that's the ground level is.
Paper's
Yeah.
blocking it. Okay, so, alright. So we are in kind of a dip there as well. Okay.
Any additional questions?
Madam Chair,
Okay, did you have anything further to add to the record, Mr. Rebecca?
we talked about the car dealership limitation, so it is 1.5 acres maximum. And then on the height discussion, there's just a few clarifications I wanted to make. So the base zoning allowed by general commercial is 55 feet. The commercial corridor applies to fairgrounds and crossroads, and that would restrict the height to 30 feet along those corridors. The Embassy Suites is approximately 96 feet. And I mentioned that if they wanted to exceed the height without the PUD, it would require a variance. That's not quite accurate. It would require a waiver to Planning Commission. So it's not necessarily the hardship to the BOA or Board of Adjustment, but that would be the process for Planning Commission. And if it's changed to 75 feet, then anything over 75 feet would go to Planning Commission for that height waiver. So those are just the clarifications I had.
Okay. Mr. Lind, are you okay if we change it when we get to that portion to a waiver? Okay. Anything further from the board? Seeing none, I would seek a motion to close public hearing.
Madam Mayor, I move that we close public hearing.
Second.
A motion on the floor from Mr. Redemeyer with a second from Mr. Wilson to close public hearing. All in favor, vote yes. Opposed, no. Public hearing is closed. Moving on to item 5, ordinance number 2018-1573. An ordinance approving a PUD, planned unit development zoning overlay for the Brands East Planned Unit Development Overlay District. Martin Lynn, manager, Eagle Crossing Windsor LLC owner, Mitch Black, Norris Design, the owner's representative. Quasi judicial, Mr. Hornbeck, anything further?
Nothing further.
Okay,
Madam Mayor, I move that we approve ordinance number 2018-1573 with the waiver extending the height of the PUD from 55 to 75.
Just to clarify,
It's a reduction from 130 to 75.
Reduced from 130.
the way, you don't need to necessarily mention.
Sorry if I said that wrong.
You don't need to mention the waiver per se. That's, the height would be 75 in the PUD, and anything beyond that would be handled per normal town procedure.
okay. Do you want to change it to, do you
Reduce
concur
it.
with what he said?
Reduce 130 to 75.
Yeah.
So
A reduction.
Reduction.
That works.
So I move that we approve ordinance number 2018-73 with the waiver to reduce the height ordinance from 130 to 75 feet. Am I saying that
Well, I
correctly?
don't know if it's a waiver that we're doing, we're making that recommendation, but I don't know that that matters.
Am I saying it good enough for the record or for a motion to be seconded or?
It sounds to me like what you're saying is that that you want to approve the PUD as presented with one exception, which is that the 130-foot height standard be reduced to 75 with the opportunity for the applicant to seek a height modification under the existing code.
Is that exactly?
That's a mouthful.
That's exactly what he meant.
You don't have to repeat it, just say you agree.
I concur with our town attorney.
I'll second Ian's motion.
Okay, Mr. Baker, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I thank you for reducing that. I think the 130 feet was, I mean, almost a non-starter for me, just not knowing what it would look like. And this will give us a chance to see it develop and that opportunity to come back and approve those individually as we see fit.
Okay, well, did you have a comment?
Yes. I guess this kind of dropped on me like a bombshell when I just got we just got our packets last Thursday. And is there a reason that we're doing the rezoning and including all these standards along with it, these standard modifications? Is that typical?
It's typical for a PUD, for the planned unit development, where they're negotiated standards, and it was done for rain dance is the most prominent example that we have in Windsor.
Okay, I mean, I would think we would typically discuss a lot of these modifications since they're pretty severe, related to what our, what our normal ordinances are. And I don't have any problem with the rezoning part of it. I maybe question the additional 400 units of multifamily. If they're being worked in over commercial and above commercial, that may, that may help the situation somewhat. I'm concerned about the shared parking as well. But as far as the uses he wants to put in that area, I don't have a major problem, but I do have a problem with the modifications that are being called for. And I understand the situation. Developer wants to streamline things. The town board wants to streamline things as much as possible. And I think once in a while, you may have to put on the brakes a little bit. That's my only comment.
Okay, well, I do have a motion on the floor and I have a second. So I have a motion on the floor from Mr. Rettenmeyer with a second from Mr. Sislowski.
And I apologize for not giving my board members a chance to make a comment before making the motion. Sorry.
So are there any final comments? Okay, if not, then all in favor with the, revised ordinance as stated by Mr. McCarter and approved by Mr. Rettenmeyer, I'll vote yes, or vote no if you do not approve. And the motion, the ordinance passes 6-1, with the yeas being Baker, Wilson, Bennett, Melendez, Rettenmeyer, Sislowski, and the nays being Jones. Moving on to item 6, ordinance number 2018-1574, an ordinance amending section 17 of the Town of Windsor Municipal Code regarding landscape requirements. This is second reading. It will require a supermajority vote. Mr. Harbeck.
Thank you. The attached ordinance for second reading of these landscape standards does include a few changes from first reading that were made in an attempt to further improve the clarity and ease of use of the landscape standards. Those substantive changes include the following: modification of the intent section to more closely resemble the current landscape standards for consistency between the two standards. Minimum spacing of 30 feet was added for street trees, and the requirement for foundation planting areas was increased from 5 feet to 10 feet when that area is immediately adjacent to public or private roads or access drives. The landscape code otherwise remains the same. Again, the goals were to reorganize the standards to be easier to use and understand, expand and refine buffer yard requirements, better address water conservation, as well as other minor clarifications and modifications. Planning Commission did recommend approval at their October 17th meeting, and staff requests the following be entered into the record: the staff memo, packet materials, public testimony, and staff recommendation. And that's all I have for you.
Okay, are there any questions for Mr. Hornbeck? Okay, seeing none, is there a motion?
Excuse me, Madam
Oh,
Mayor.
I'm sorry, I do need to take public hearing.
Correct.
Yes, I'm sorry, second reading. Is there anybody who wishes to address the board on this particular agenda item? Okay, seeing none, then I would seek a motion.
Madam Mayor, I move that we approve ordinance number 2018-1574.
Second?
A motion on the floor from Mr. Bennett with a second from Mr. Rennemeyer, approving ordinance number 2018-1574. All in favor, vote yes. Opposed, no. And the ordinance passes unanimously. Moving on to item 7, ordinance number 2018-1575, an ordinance adopting Article 11 of Chapter 10 of the Windsor Municipal Code concerning the public consumption of alcohol within the town of Windsor. Again, second reading, it will require a supermajority, and Chief Clemick will give us presentation.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and board members. I'll make this concise and quick. It's, the state legislature changed 3-2 alcohol this, last year. It's going away, so our ordinance speaks to 3-2 alcohol as the only alcohol you can have in the park. So what we're doing is we're changing the ordinance to allow beer and alcohol, or beer and wine in the parks, with some exceptions, Chimney Park being one of them. There'll be some permitted areas at times for family gatherings and that nature, but basically is we're changing our ordinance to fall in step with the state's change in the revised statute. So you'll be able to have beer and wine in the parks, and we're going to sunset this at 1 year, so we'll track if there's any issues with it, and if we do, we'll come back and change it at that time. Any questions?
Are there any questions, Mr. Baker?
Are there any, I mean, this applies to any park, my neighborhood, little neighborhood park?
Yes.
Beer and wine?
Yes.
And obviously it has to be designated as a park by the town of Windsor.
Yes, sir.
What about Metro District open spaces, and those have their own covenants?
It'll be allowed in those areas. There's, the statute still has some restrictions as far as what public consumption is, and restricts that, but it'll still be allowed in those public areas, like park.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any additional questions? Okay, seeing none, again, this is second reading. Is there anybody who wishes to address the board on this particular agenda item? Seeing none, I would seek a motion.
Madam Mayor, I move that we approve ordinance number 2018-1575 as presented.
A motion on the floor from Mr. Wilson with a second from Dr. Jones to approve of ordinance 2018-1575. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. And the ordinance passes unanimously. Moving on to item 8, ordinance number 2018-1576, an ordinance repealing, amending, adding, and readopting portions of Chapter 6, Article 1 of the Windsor Municipal Code concerning the elimination of 3.2 beer. Again, second reading, it will require a supermajority vote. Ms. Emel.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Town Board. Following Chief Clemick's presentation, this is our attempt to align our code with the requirements under the state legislature beginning the first of the year. In addition to eliminating 3.2 beer in the state, They also changed all the liquor codes from Title 12 and moved into Title 44. So we had to make those changes within our code as well. And as I said the last time, I hope I caught them all, or you'll see me back again. But there have been no changes to this ordinance since the last reading.
Okay. Are there any questions for Ms. Emo? Seeing none, again, this is second reading. Is there anybody who wishes to address the board on this particular agenda item? Seeing none, I would seek a motion.
Madam Mayor, I'd move for the approval of ordinance number 2018-1576.
Second.
Motion on the floor from Dr. Jones with a second from Mr. Bennett approving ordinance number 2018-1576. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. And the ordinance passes unanimously. Moving on to item 9, ordinance number 2018-1564. An ordinance annexing and zoning certain property known as the Great Western 7th Annexation to the Town of Windsor, GWIP LLC and Windsor Renewal 1 LLC owners Craig Stipe. Great Western Development Omnitrax, the applicant, Corey Retz, Otten Johnson, Robinson Neff, and Raganetti, applicants' representatives. Whew, that's a mouthful. Again, this is a second reading, will require a supermajority vote. Ms. Berry.
Yes, thank you. This is second reading, so I'll try to make this presentation as quick as I can, but I don't want to leave out anything. It has been a few months since this has been before you. This annexation has been reviewed in accordance with Article 1 of Chapter 15 of the Municipal Code. The site is located on the eastern side of town, just east of the Great Western Industrial Park, east of Weld County Road 23 and south of Eastman Park Drive. The subject property is approximately 349 acres. They're proposing to have the property zoned heavy industrial, or IH. I did want to say that no development is proposed at this time. The purpose of this annexation is just to prepare the properties for development when they find the suitors to come. The adjacent zoning, this is immediately adjacent to the existing city properties, is the IH, or heavy industrial zoning, as you can see in the dark purple in the area around it. The land use plan, this property is within the town's growth management area. It is an area that is expected to annex at some certain point in time. The land use attributed to this, or assigned to this, I should say, is also heavy industrial, so it matches exactly what the proposed zoning is. There is some open space floodplain mineral extraction, which is the green color along the river, and that is also across this area, but right now the zoning is just the heavy industrial in this area. The land is in the secondary growth area for our growth strategy. However, it is immediately adjacent to town limits, so it falls in easily accessible and easily serviced and utility extension of the area, or easily urbanized. We do have an annexation plat, and it's been reviewed by staff. There are a few things that are going to be amended on the plat. We're still working through a couple things, but the majority of it's there. During the annexation process, the staff has determined that the request does meet Colorado state statutes, with the map being consistent with the petition, that the property is eligible for annexation, meaning it is contiguous to the town, and also easily urbanized. There's no limits to the annexation, meaning that's not being annexed by another community, and election is not required for this particular one. I did want to touch on the annexation agreement. This is another item on your agenda. We have been working through that. That's one reason why we have taken a few months to get back to you. One of the main items in the annexation agreement includes dedication of Weld County Road 23 and also Crossroads Boulevard. One thing that I wanted to let you know during this discussion, there has been found that a portion of the Poudre Trail does cross this property in the sorry, this is such a small picture, but this is the town's town limits, and then it follows the river corridor. And the Pooter Trail goes and nicks this area and then comes down and crosses the river over here. So there is a small portion here that we achieved an easement from the applicants to get, is it a full easement or a dedication of right of way?
We've got it set up either as a long-term lease or as an easement. We still haven't quite figured that out.
Okay, but it's in good intention, in good shape. There are some other things. The sanitation sewer needs to be worked out, and that's not something that has to be worked out with the annexation agreement. It's something that needs to be steps after the annexation goes through, just changing the 208 boundary that has to do with who gets to serve what and where by what municipality. And there's also studies that are requested for the lift station to make sure it has capacity. The other item that we talked about before, if you remember, is the protection of the Pooter River corridor. We have been working with the applicant, staff has been working with the applicant to develop some kind of agreement on how that is going to be. We haven't gotten to the point of actually what that looks like yet, whether it's going to be an easement or some kind of setback or something like that. But we have already met with staff a couple times. I'm sorry, staff has met with the applicant a couple times already to try to move through this. So we have kept the language in the annexation agreement that talked about this approach to have staff and the applicant come together and find something that will protect both interests. So that's in the annexation agreement as well. Notification areas, as an annexation, it needs to be notified, and we followed those from the neighborhood meeting to the initial review from public hearing from Planning Commission and Town Board, and now we're here for the second reading of that ordinance that was done back in July. So the top one is the annexation ordinance. That's 2018-1564. And if you recall, at the July 18th regular meeting, the Planning Commission recommended approval with those modifications made to the annexation map. And then the Town Board approved the first reading in July 23rd with the same direction to make sure that the adjustments to the plat are made before recording. And then the second point is the annexation agreement resolution, and the staff has worked through the agreement with the applicant and feel it is at the point that we can have this resolution come to the board. So that is the rest of the end of the presentation. If you have any questions, I'm here. The applicant is also here, and I'm happy to answer what I can.
Are there any questions? Mr. Baker?
I have a question. It's hard for me to remember April, but I'll try. What sort of protections are in there? You mentioned you would agree to work with the applicant on the Pooter River.
Right.
There's nothing to compel them to work with us on protecting the river, or is there floodplain? Like, isn't there some sort of limit to where they can build?
There is a floodplain along there. If you recall, I'm going to switch back so I don't look too quick, because some people don't like that. This green area in the area is the general area. It's both the Pooter floodplain and it's also the John Law floodplain, so they come together. So in this area where it comes up here, it looks a little extra land in that. So there is floodplain along there. It's at least 100, if not 500. And it's quite a wide floodway to add to that. So that is the main reason that it has the open space. It's 3 parts: open space, mineral extraction, and I forgot the other one. Floodplain. Yes, floodplain. Those 3 are the designation there. So yes, but technically you can develop in the 100-year floodplain, 500-year floodplain with floodplain regulations. The floodplain, no, but it's a large area and they can develop it within those.
So even though that is green there, it is still going to be heavy industrial.
And that is the proposed zoning for this property.
And there's nothing to compel them to.
We did originally come with an idea of putting some kind of easement along the area. One of the main reasons for the easement was to be able to get into the area and apply some of the restoration plans that were underway with the Lower Pooter plan. And at first that was, what that easement was wasn't fully developed yet, so there was some pushback on, well, why don't we work together as we get, or as the applicant gets interested development in the area, we could work with each of the developments to make sure that, the Poudre Corps itself is protected, that there is access to the areas that are on the restoration plan and those ideas. And then we met with them a few times after that, and we've been just exchanging what does that mean? Is it a setback? Is it an easement? If it's an easement, what's allowed in the easement? The approach right now doesn't necessarily hinder development in the easement. It just allows for access and then also some kind of buffer area to protect vegetation and other functions of the river besides just the floodway, flood conveyance, habitat, wildlife corridor, that kind of thing. So no, there's nothing in place right now to protect it, and that's what we're hoping to get with this annexation agreement.
We have a responsibility to protect our section of the Poudre Trail, so maybe it's a legal question, but what can we do to ensure that we're protecting the Poudre Trail? How do we do this?
That's part of why, at least in this little tiny part of this annexation, we have agreed to a more permanent way of preserving it. Unfortunately, the trail in this annexation only covers that little tiny corner that Melissa showed you a minute ago. The rest of it is something that we have been talking with representatives of the Bro Group, Great Western, about, because the future or the remaining duration of the easements that were granted for the trail is starting to approach. So Wade Willis is working on that, and I'm confident that given that the trail is already there, we'll figure out a way to make those easements more permanent or some type of long-term lease. But what's in our crosshairs right now is just that little portion that falls within this annexation.
Any other questions? Okay. Again, this is a second reading, so if there's anybody who wanted to address the board on this agenda item, this would be your opportunity. Seeing none, I would seek a motion.
Madam Mayor, I move we approve ordinance number 2018-1564.
Second.
The motion on the floor for Mr. Rennemeyer with a second for Mr. Wilson, approving ordinance 2018-1564. All in favor, vote yes. Opposed, no. And the ordinance passes unanimously. Moving on to item 10, resolution number 2018-99. A resolution approving an annexation agreement between the Town of Windsor and Windsor Renewal One LLC and GWIP LLC with respect to the Great Western 7th annexation to the Town of Windsor and authorizing the mayor to execute the same. Ms. Berry?
No additional staff report for this or presentation.
Okay. Any additional comments or questions from town board members? If not, is there a motion?
Madam Mayor, I'll move the board approve resolution number 2018-99 as submitted.
Second.
Motion on the floor from Mr. Kozlowski with a second from Dr. Jones approving resolution 2018-99. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. And the resolution passes unanimously. Moving on to item 11, a public hearing. A public hearing for rezoning petition, portion of Eastbrook annexation number 1 and Eastbrook annexation number 2 and number 3. Global Asset Recovery LLC, owner David Cheddar is the applicant. Quasi judicial, Ms. Berry's going to give presentation, and I would seek a motion to open public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Motion on the floor from Mr. Rennemeyer with a second from Mr. Kozlowski to open public hearing. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. Public hearing is now opened.
David, do you need to read your disclaimer?
Thank you. Madam Mayor, for the record, I am the board liaison to the Planning Commission, and at the last Planning Commission meeting, this matter was heard. I did not participate in that public hearing. I was merely there to observe. I will remain neutral, and any decision I make with respect to this matter will be based solely on the information I obtained during this public hearing tonight.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Berry?
Yes, thank you. This rezoning request has been processed in accordance with Article 5 of Chapter 16 of the Municipal Code. The site is located northwest of County Road 21 and 392 intersection. The current zoning of the property, it actually has 3 zonings. The northernmost, single-family 2, which is a duplex level density zoning, limited industrial in the center, the IL, and then general commercial on the south, the GC zoning. So the request is to take the 65 acres and rezone the majority of it. About 56 acres would go to residential mixed use, which is RMU, and then about 9 acres would go to general commercial. Just on this area, this northern area above the Greeley Canal would go from SF2 to RMU. The center area of IL2 would go to RMU, and then the southern portion that was GC would go to RMU. And then over here, this portion above, right in, or in this area, I should say, goes from limited industrial to the general commercial, but the southern portion is the part that's remaining general commercial. So it's a mixing up of the existing and different land uses. This does have a background. I'm not sure if all of you know about this, but in 2016, the applicant began discussions with the board and about changing the uses allowed on the site. And one of those was through a concept plan. The concept plan had a residential level density with a multifamily component, and then also a commercial component along Will County 21. Those discussions went on, and there was a fiscal analysis done at that time on whether or not pros and cons of giving up industrial and general commercial space was beneficial to the town or not. It was found that it was supportable to change it to the requested land uses. The step 1 was in 2017. There was an amendment with the Windsor Severance IGA. That IGA, or intergovernmental agreement, originally framed that light industrial, the general commercial uses in this area. This amendment allowed that area, the specific area of the agreement of the Severance and Windsor planning area, to go to allow residential uses in there. In 2018, the applicant worked through a traffic study to determine what the appropriate access points are and where they should be located on both Will County 21 and whether or not it should be off of 392. And then after that, there's preparation for this rezoning. With this rezone, there's also a land use map amendment that is based on approval of this rezone by the town board. The land use map amendment only goes to planning commission, but again, it was based on town board's approving of this. That land use map amendment just adjusts those land uses, and I can show that. In the future, if this is approved, major subdivision would be the next step. So this is the land use map. It's also got 3 designations. The top one is floodplain, open space, mineral. There is a floodplain on the area. It's a 100-year floodplain. It has to do with the John Law Ditch. There have been improvements in the areas and requests for map revisions, but it is still either 500 or 100-year floodplain at this point. The center is actually RMU right now. That was done in last year's land use map amendments, and then the south portion is general commercial land use. And basically, it's a mix-up of the 3 again, with residential mixed use being the bulk in the middle. That will allow for both the single family and the multifamily. The Greeley Canal, number 2, and the John Law would become an open space area for drainage, and then the commercial would remain on the area along County Road 21. So looking at the comprehensive plan, it does appear to meet the comprehensive plan in a couple areas. The residential areas growth framework plan is asking to support a diversity of housing types. This has your mixed use and your single family, and actually two sizes of single family. And also supports a higher density residential, which would be closer to 392, near supporting services, which would be that neighborhood commercial that's there, and then also what's going on at 392 and 257. For the commercial, it does still maintain some commercial to help support that neighborhood And then also other areas in there, there's more development going on there, so that's going on. Again, notification for this had, there was a neighborhood meeting in September. Quite a few applicants or residents came to this. I'd say there was about 18 or 20. There was a packet material that included the neighborhood meeting notes. The largest concern conveyed was traffic in the area. It wasn't necessarily to this particular property. It was any development that would happen. Then, of course, the public hearing notifications. Oops. There was one thing that came up at the Planning Commission meeting that I wanted to bring up. There's a large, I believe it's cottonwood tree, that some of the neighbors were concerned about and wanted to make sure that it wasn't taken down. The applicant has brought in some information for us to show where that location is, or where the tree location is, and that it is actually outside the platted area. So, and there's no intention of it to be removed anyway. So I wanted to bring that up in case that comes up tonight. So the recommendation tonight is that the Planning Commission did review this at the November 7th Planning Commission meeting, and that's conditioned on all remaining staff comments being addressed since this meeting and since the packet went out for you. Those items have come back through staff, and they have been addressed. So we are happy with the rezone map and the information that's there. So staff does request the following be entered into the record: the materials in the application, the staff memorandum, the testimony received at the public hearing, and also this recommendation. The applicant is here tonight if you have any questions for him, and I'm happy to answer anything I can as well.
Okay, are there any questions for Ms. Berry? Any questions for the applicant?
No.
Okay, this is a public hearing. Is there anybody who wish to address the board on this particular agenda item? Okay, seeing none, if there are
I'm sorry,
no.
I'm
Mr.
sorry,
Baker.
I have a question, maybe for the applicant or Ms. Berry. There was discussion a long time ago, maybe a couple years, about another entrance off, or the road extending at 392, but you don't own the property. Can you refresh my memory on that part?
Yes,
Maybe you own it.
my name is David Cheddar, and I'm the applicant for Global Asset Recovery LLC. We've been working on this project now for about 3 years to get it right. What we ended up doing over the traffic issue is we went ahead and initiated a full-blown traffic study with Matt Derlich, and we sat down with staff based on that traffic report and came up with the layout that you see before you.
There's no update on that north-south?
I
don't know what road
right
that is.
now, the property to the west of us is owned by the Jacques. It used to be the Hua property, and that particular west boundary along with the, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but it's the property right before the Great West Trail on the west side. The west and east boundary there is the I believe the half section line or the quarter section line, and that's where the intersection would be off of CDOT in the future.
Yeah, no, I'm just trying to remember that.
Yeah, it was to the
There's a lot
west of us. It's property we don't own,
Right.
and it's encumbered. We've looked at it, multiple different ways because of the flood situation. We've got 4,400 CFS coming through there, and even after we do all the work on our property, you'll have an additional 2,800 CFS continuing over to the Great West Trail, at which point it'll sheet across 392.
So there'll be no access when that road finally.
That would be something for the town in the future, depending on we've looked at that 5-acre parcel to try to remedy it, and, frankly, there's just no ground left after you calculate in the water and everything else, to make it, viable for us, so.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Any additional questions? is nobody, I think I asked already, right, from the audience? Okay, so. Then I would request a motion to close public hearing.
So moved.
Second?
Motion on the floor for Mr. Rademeyer, the second for Mr. Bennett to close public hearing. All in favor, vote yes. Opposed, no. And public hearing is closed. Can we take a 5-minute recess?
You've got the gavel, Madam
Okay,
Mayor.
I'm going to call for about a 5-10-minute recess. We've been at it for about 5 hours now, and I think we need to take a little break.
Yeah.
That passed unanimously.
portion of Eastbrook Annexation Number 1 and Eastbrook Annexation Number 2 and Number 3. Global Asset Recovery LLC, owner David Cheddar, the applicant. This is first reading and quasi-judicial. Ms. Berry, did you have anything further to add?
I do not, unless you have any questions for me.
Okay. Any further questions from town board members? If not, is there a motion?
Madam Mayor, I move the board approve ordinance number 2018-1577.
Second.
I have a motion on the floor from Mr. Kozlowski with a second from Dr. Jones approving ordinance 2018-1577. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. And the ordinance passes unanimously. Moving on to number 13, ordinance number 2018-1578. An ordinance approving the transfer of water rights from Town of Windsor to Diamond Valley LLC. Again, first reading, and Mr. Thornhill is going to give presentation.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Town Board. This is basically just a house maintenance issue. The town previously agreed as part of the First Amendment to the Alter Hot annexation agreement to transfer to Diamond Valley 1/2 of the water rights that were originally transferred in the annexation agreement. The water was never transferred until now, but it has been delivered over the years. We have managed to run those agreements. We're just kind of cleaning house right now and getting those transfers approved and stuff. After this ordinance is approved, we'll go back to the current board, approve the capacity agreement that was signed by Diamond Valley as well. So that's really all I have, unless you have any questions.
Okay, any questions? Mr. McCarter?
It's a bit unusual to approve a transaction like this by ordinance, but this is driven by the charter. Charter requires that if you're going to transfer water rights, you must do it by ordinance. It's one of the few things you must do by ordinance.
When I read the title of this particular item, I had to peel me off the ceiling to why we were transferring water rights. But I read it, and I get it. We have a well somewhere, or half a well.
It's 1 CFS. It runs from April 15th to October 31st, or no more than 240 acre-feet a year. It's the total amount of water that we would have to deliver.
Okay. If there are no additional questions, I would seek a motion.
Madam Mayor, I move that we approve ordinance number 2018-1578.
Second.
Motion on the floor from Mr. Bennett with a second from Mr. Rennemeyer approving ordinance 2018-1578. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. And the ordinance passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Item 14, ordinance number 2018-1579. An ordinance creating section 1-5-50 of the Windsor Municipal Code, establishing procedures for entry of default and default judgments and collections in Windsor Municipal Court. Again, first reading and legislative action. Ms. Emel.
Thank you. As we discussed in the work session, this is being brought about because the Windsor Municipal Court, we're kind of at a impasse where it comes to being able to enforce certain violations in our municipal code and or enforce things where people can't or won't pay the fines. So what this proposes to do is create a procedure for entering default for failures to appear and for failures to pay, entering default judgments, and then being able to send them off to collections if we find it's necessary to do that. We didn't have anything like this in our code before. We used to be able to issue bench warrants, and we're no longer able to do that for failures to pay. And do you have any other questions for me? It's really a pretty simple process on this. The municipal court is, the way we set up the code, this would have the municipal court having the authority to pursue the collection of an amount due from a defendant, and then the municipal court is to adopt the procedures for the collections in addition to any other remedy available, and any cost for collections would also be assumed by the defendant.
Okay, are there any questions from Ms. Emel? Okay, seeing none, is there a motion?
Madam Mayor, I move we approve ordinance number 2018-1579.
Second.
The motion on the floor from Mr. Redemeyer with a second from Mr. Wilson approving ordinance 2018-1579. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. And the ordinance passes unanimously. Item 15, ordinance number 2018-1580, an ordinance repealing section 10-4-110, subsection 4 of the Windsor Municipal Code concerning vagrancy. First reading and legislative action. Ms. Emo.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just by way of background, the higher courts have struck down language similar to the language that is in that subsection 4 of our vagrancy code regarding panhandling or begging. So in response to these judicial determinations, we have prepared the ordinance that's before you that removes that particular paragraph from the code. Everything else within that code remains in effect, and the impacts of the removal of that code really are addressed by other code sections that we have. So it really doesn't have any impact on the town by the removal of that portion.
Okay. Are there any questions for Ms. Emo on this ordinance? If none, I would seek a motion.
I move that we approve ordinance number 2018-1580.
Second.
A motion on the floor from Mr. Wilson with a second from Mr. Baker approving ordinance 2018-1580. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. And the ordinance passes unanimously. Moving on to item 16, Community Development Report. Mr. Balstead.
In light of the long agenda and the late hour, staff simply put the community development report in the packet, and if the board has any questions, please let staff know. Otherwise, I don't have a formal presentation for you tonight. The 480 permits through the end of October is about 36 shy of how many we had last year, so with 2 months remaining, we'll probably exceed the number of new home permits that we issued last year. And we've got several multifamily permits in the queue that will probably see another spike yet this year before the end of the year, so.
Okay,
Yeah, I
Mr.
do have a question. We've had an increase in multifamily units over the last couple of years. Do we have any idea how many have actually received their certificate of occupancy?
Of the multifamily projects
Yeah,
that we've approved,
multifamily.
they've all proceeded after approval through construction, so the units up in South Hill at the 7th and Crossroads roundabout all received their COs.
Okay.
The ones that are being constructed on Steeplechase in the Eagle Crossing subdivision, those are just underway, the first phase. So they haven't received any COs yet, but they are actively under construction. And we've recently completed some of the other smaller projects in grasslands. And I think the one over at Chestnut is still working on their infrastructure. So they probably won't have any COs for a while yet.
This is for my own personal information. Is there any easy way, I don't want staff to do a big job, is there any easy way that I could find out what the general leases are running for?
Leases for the rental
Per square
apartments.
foot, or, you know, is there?
We could
yeah.
probably ask the builder of the apartment complexes for that information. I don't know if there are any townhomes or condos that are being constructed, sold, and then rented. Those would be a little more difficult to
They're being
obtain.
sold,
but-
yeah, so we could look at the price for sale.
Right.
Okay.
But we can definitely get you the rental information on the apartments.
What I'm looking to find out is around affordable housing. I know what the median price is for a single-family home. We see data on that, but I don't know with the multifamily, just some general ideas about what either the costs are or the leases are running.
I think
Again,
with,
don't go out and do a lot of work, I'm just curious.
yeah, no, I think with our contacts, we can get some information out to the board on that.
On the total projects, on the second to the last, what's vacation?
A vacation of an easement or a vacation,
Okay.
you're
You only had one.
the second to the last.
Yeah, it's vacation. So it's on the bar graph, Scott. It's, we're showing one. It's on
Okay.
page.
Yeah, it was probably a petition to vacate an
Vacate,
easement.
okay, that's what I figured, but I just wanted to make sure.
Sure.
So it's basically, it's the town's ownership or interest in a right of way is abandoned.
Right.
Okay. Any additional questions for Scott?
Thanks.
Thank you. Sorry to keep you so long, just to
Yeah,
tell us,
just to
give
hear
us
it.
a 2-minute review here. Item D, communications from town attorney.
Nothing other than I'm standing in for Mr. Moyer tonight during the current board meeting because it is past his bedtime.
Okay. Communications from town staff, chief or Scott, anything further? Communications from town manager?
You wore me down, Mayor. I have nothing.
Communications from town board members? Okay.
I'm just a little concerned that Chief's still here because he knows we're doing their review and he's the muscle.
So, I just have a question, because we're gonna move into, executive session. And then excuse you guys, so we can talk about how we're gonna present our evaluations to you. But we also have the current board. Can we do that before we do, can we switch that order so like if you don't, so if there's folks who are hanging around for that, or do we have to do the executive session, come out of that and do the current board, or
Get adjourned.
what would be the?
You could declare a recess and then convene the Kern board and then return to the regular meeting and proceed to the.
I mean, I just think that if that might help expedite a few things for some folks who don't have to hang around until that we get done with our evaluation conversation to talk about the Kern board. Because I don't think the Kern board will take more than 5 minutes.
So what I would ask you to do, though, is to take a motion to take a recess of the Windsor Town Board
Okay.
and take a vote on that, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, is there a motion on the floor to take a recess from the regular town board meeting?
Can I ask a quick question before we move into executive session? So I guess this might fall under communications from town board. I didn't want to bring this up earlier and kill our flow of approving the bills, but I had a question for our town manager. In the IT part of the billing, we do look at these. I know staff may think that we don't. There's a line item, and I think that we can, obviously the description of what a charge is can be very limited, obviously for room. But there's a charge to New Egg Business for an extra long phone cord for $4,869.
It says extra long. so-
It says extra long. I know that doesn't give enough room
So,
to, sure.
let me talk to finance. I will tell you that if staff has an invoice and it has 30 things on it, normally times like the accounting clerk will just type in the first thing and it'll show that. So like, how much did we pay for a screwdriver or whatever else? I think that's a valid question. I would be happy to check with finance and find out what else is on that invoice.
It's not so much I'm critiquing necessarily.
No,
I went,
I-
wow, that's
I feel comfortable in telling you that I do not believe that it's only a phone call.
I'm sure it wasn't, but
I
would not be doing the residents of Windsor due diligence if I didn't ask about an extra long phone cord costing $4,900. So,
Right, so what I would do, with your pleasure, is I will talk to finance tomorrow. I will find out what else was included, and I'll just send the board a clarification email.
and maybe there's just some clarification on how they list the bills, or if it's miscellaneous or something, or I don't know. Maybe
I'll tell you, this has come up 300 times in my career, and it's always
Okay.
because somebody's like, puts the first thing in an invoice, or
normally they're pretty descriptive enough to know what it is, but I saw that one and I went, well, I need to ask. So.
okay.
Look at the current board expenses.
Okay, so back to, is there a motion?
I will move that we take town board meeting in recess.
Okay.
Second.
A motion on the floor from Mr. Sislowski with a second from Mr. Bennett to take a recess from the regular town board meeting. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. And it passes unanimously. So we are in recess of the regular town board meeting, and so we will now call the Kern board meeting to order for November 26, 2018.
Mayor Melendez, can I change out the recording on here first?
I'm sorry?
I need to change the recording to the current board.
Okay.
For all the people still watching at home,
And you're gonna let me know when you have it done?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, you do Pentagon, $2,900 for the AC.
I just, like I said, I think the residents of Windsor needed to know what a 49.
It was
I
fiber.
still don't know.
It was fiber optic.
Uh,
Yeah, it was fiber. We're doing 1 gig phone.
Running it out to Public Works.
Okay, we're switched.
Okay, we're ready to go? Okay, so we will call the Kern board meeting to order for November 26, 2018 at 10:36 PM. First item of business, a roll call of directors present.
President Christy Melendez,
Here?
Vice President Ken Bennett,
Here.
Miles Baker,
Here.
Barry Wilson,
Here.
Secretary Treasurer Paul Rennemeyer,
Here?
Tom Jones,
Here.
David Sislowski.
Here.
Okay, first item of business is approval of the September 10th, 2018 Board of Directors meeting.